All right, welcome to the A's Philosophy YouTube channel. I am A's Philosophy, and in this stream, we are going to try to get an open discussion going. But before we do that, as we usually do, I'm going to discuss some things that I think are important a little bit, maybe a few minutes, maybe half an hour, I don't know. And we'll get before we get into the open discussion. And to me, and obviously something that's been a point of discussion recently, obviously, if you're watching the news, is what happened with Charlie Kirk. And I do want to discuss that a little bit. Not that we have to discuss that if people join, but I do want to say some things because I've been thinking about this recently, as a lot of people have. I do think this is a very significant cultural event that's going to have implications going forward, as it should. I think this is a moment of reflection for our country, and a lot is being exposed. And I just want to say that personally, I know that Charlie Kirk was a controversial figure. He's one of the kind of people that you either love him or hate him. Not a lot of people had a new. If you, I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of people who didn't know who he was, but if you know who he is, he held strong opinions on a lot of different topics. Uh, and my personal opinion is that I think Charlie Kirk was a great human being. Not that I agree with everything he said, but his basic approach was essentially to just go and talk to people. And even when you don't agree with someone's views on a certain thing, I think that's commendable because I think that's how true peace will arise. Now, what we've learned is that I guess not everyone agrees with that. If you try to argue certain perspectives publicly, then you are essentially basically a terrorist. And the world is better off without you. And this is just not, I mean, I could say it's not American, but it's just not even like a rational thought, in my opinion. I mean, yeah, I guess there are certain extents, but with the things that Charlie was saying, he wasn't this psycho, this just absolute moral monster running around saying the crazy. I mean, he was saying things that like a vast majority of people would have believed within the last few decades, just in the last few decades. I guess recently we had a liberal turn, and now people are starting to think that, if you believe there are only two genders, then you're kind of like a maniac that's just trying to trample people's human rights and stuff. Anyways, we can get into that, but yeah, I do believe Charlie Kirk was someone who can inspire people, not necessarily in forming their beliefs, although that as well, but just in the way you engage those with whom you disagree. Your objective of trying to reach out to other people who disagree with you and trying to help them understand where you're coming from. Hi, objective. Yeah, I started a little bit early because I just was able to, and I wanted to start as early as possible. I think I had it originally scheduled for 8:30, so not that early, but yeah, I just was able to do that. So that's what happened. I changed the time. That happens sometimes. Um, where was I? Oh yeah, the Charlie Kirk. Now, as those are my opinions on Charlie Kirk. I was a fan of Charlie Kirk. I had followed Charlie Kirk for a long time. For years, I've listened to Charlie Kirk, and again, that doesn't mean I agree with everything he said. That doesn't mean I was just this sponge who just agreed that he couldn't say anything wrong. No, I disagree with Charlie Kirk on things, and I can see how other people would see him as a controversial figure. But I couldn't imagine that in the United States of America, which is based on the idea that we have free speech rights, and this kind of Voltaire concept of I may not agree with what you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. That we've reached the point where we are right now, where not only did Charlie Kirk get murdered for basically just trying to express his political views in public and engage people who disagree with him in good in a civil dialogue type fashion, but there are the response by the opponents of Charlie Kirk has, I think, demonstrated more than any argument that Charlie Kirk could have ever made. Champ, I'm going to post a link later, but you're going to have to prove who you are because I had never seen you before. And the last time I let someone on who I didn't know, that person violated, that trust. So I'm not letting on anyone who I can't verify who the person is. I just want to let you know that right now. I'm just not going to do it. I think that Charlie Kirk's whole idea can you get someone to vouch for you? I'll talk to you when I post the link. Okay, you can look at that. But really, I'm not in a trusting mood just because of what happened last time. It's kind of difficult. I'm not on TikTok, so I don't know who you are. I think that not only Charlie Kirk's assassination, but the response by people who oppose him has demonstrated the borderline level of psychosis and evil and moral sickness and depravity of the left. Now, I wish Charlie Kirk didn't have to die for that to happen. But if you study the history of leftist movements around the world globally, they are a murderous bunch. The communists and the socialists in the last century murdered way more people than any other political movement in history, except for maybe Islam, but that wasn't a political movement. They murdered more than the Nazis and the fascists, way more, in order of magnitude more. Lower estimates are 100 million. Some people put as many as 500 million people were just straight up murdered by communist governments in the 20th century. So this isn't a surprise that they kill people who they don't like and who oppose their power. But the average person probably isn't familiar with that. I think that with social media and what's going on and the response by the left and the people on that side to the murder of Charlie Kirk, a lot of people are being exposed to how really sick they are, how evil they are, how filled with hate and anger they are, that they would glorify in the death of one of their political opponents. And I'm sure if someone on the left died, people on the right would probably do the same thing. Some of them. I don't think it would happen to the extent we're seeing, though. I don't think you'd see thousands and thousands of right-wing people going on social media and praising the assassination of a prominent leftist liberal political figure. I'm not sure how you would see it. And just the fact that we haven't seen retaliatory violence, I think, kind of proves that, because I know a lot of people on the right are very angry. I'm angry about what happened. But the response has mostly been tempered, just like retaliating in violence isn't the answer. There just has to be another way to focus our anger. But what people are seeing is not only that Charlie Kirk was murdered for trying to engage in dialogue, but that a lot of people are happy that this happened. A lot of people we thought we knew, a lot of people we thought were, basically decent human beings. And they're basically saying that, yeah, if you say certain things or believe certain things, then basically you deserve to die. And I think that the fact that we reached that is quite disturbing. I'm going to give some examples just so people know I'm not making things up and just trying to slander the left. And I think I'll do that right now. Let's get started on. I'm just going to give you a few examples. Champ. Do you have like a YouTube channel or a link that you can post in the? I'll talk to you later when I post the link. Yeah, I just want to go through some examples of leftists just celebrating or basically mocking and basically reveling in the fact that they're one of the main opponents of their ideology has been silenced by being murdered. So let me share my screen real quick. We're going to go through a couple of these examples. Not too many. I could do this all day, but I don't want to waste too much time. All right, here we go. All right, we got the Daily Mail. Again, the sources are what they are. They may not be trustworthy, but I think it's pretty. So we had a New York University. It's going to be hard to read. Try to zoom in a little bit. New York University, the chapter of college attended a memorial for Charlie Kirk on Sunday night after he was shot in Utah. This was a couple days ago. A woke mob basically went up to this group of people holding a vigil to remember and memorialize Charlie Kirk, which even if you didn't agree with him, like, imagine how sick you would have to be to go up to these people and chant disgusting things to them while they're grieving the loss of someone that inspired them. So let's listen a little bit of what was said by these monsters. I need to start a little bit early. So these are people who are opposed to Charlie Kirk, screaming nasty things at these people holding a vigil. Now, what is Bella Ciao? You saw how that freak was chanting Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao. It is supposedly an anti-fascist message that is basically glorifying the downfall of evil fascists in Europe from the Italian era. So basically, this person is going up to this vigil of Charlie Kirk fans and chanting that the slogan that was meant to glorify and support the death of fascists in Italy, Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao. And that was basically also the killer of Charlie Kirk had engraved that message on the bullets that he fired at Charlie Kirk. This is what the investigators of the Charlie Kirk incident found. So, and this is what happens. So this is what he's chanting. He's chanting about that anti-fascist slogan to these Kirk supporters while they're breathing. Here's another event. Listen to what happens.
I don't want your salvations.
Why?
I want you to die. We're not going to give you a second chance, even when you beg for it on your knees, begging and pleading.
So
a lot to go on.
Let's go back. Let's review what just happened. So this is the Charlie Kirk vigil at New York University. The leftists go and disrupt it, chanting anti-fascist slogans, and then there's a guy singing a song. One of the people, the college Republican, says, "I'll pray for your salvation because you're in a dark place," and his response was to sing, playing guitar. We can watch it again. "I hope you fucking die," quote, and that we won't give you a second chance, even if you're begging and pleading. Can you imagine how sick you have to be to say that to someone's face, how evil you have to be? This is the left, folks. This is who they are. Let's listen again. So I'll pray for your salvation is what the Republicans said, which is, leftist secularists, they don't believe in salvation. They don't believe in God. But that's if you do believe in God, you want what's best for them. If the best thing that can happen to a person is that they're saved and go to heaven. So this person is saying, "I want you to be saved because you're in a dark place." What is the other person's response? Let's watch again.
I don't want your salvations.
Why?
I want you to die. We're not going to give you a second chance, even when you beg for it on your knees, begging and pleading.
I don't want your salvation. I want you to effing die. We won't give you a second chance, even if you're begging and pleading. That was the leftist response to the Charlie Kirk supporter praying for his salvation, while they were holding a peaceful vigil after Charlie Kirk got murdered. This is the evil that is in these people's hearts. They are sick people. Let's keep going. This was shortly after it was announced that Charlie Kirk had died.
We got Charlie in the neck. We got Charlie in the neck. Who's up next?
We got Charlie in the neck. We got Charlie in the neck. Who's up next? In the streets with a megaphone, chanting and praising like it's the 4th of July that Charlie Kirk has been murdered by being shot in the neck. These young, twisted, disgusting leftists cheering the death of their political opponent. We got Charlie in the neck. We got Charlie in the neck. Who's next? As in, we're going to kill more of you because we hate you. Let's listen to it again.
We got Charlie in the neck. We got Charlie in the neck. Who's up next? We got Charlie in the neck. We got Charlie in the neck.
We got Charlie in the neck. We got Charlie in the neck. Who's up next? As in, yeah, we killed who inspired you. Who are we gonna kill next? How about that? How's that for sickness? How's that for evil? This is there are literally countless videos like this on the internet of leftists behaving this way and saying things like this. Let's keep going. Oxford University. So that's probably some random guy out in the middle. Listen, there are famous people saying these things. Look at this. Oxford's Union. Oxford Union is not a minor organization. It's one of the most prominent organizations in England for like scholars and academics to gather and discuss important ideas. The president of the Oxford Union celebrated Charlie's death. Here he is. George Aberonier, I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce that correctly, wrote, "Charlie Kirk got shot, let's go," in a WhatsApp group after he was fatally shot. This is the Times, so this isn't some right-wing outfit that's just making things up. Charlie Kirk got shot, let's effing go. He's a leftist who is the president currently of the Oxford Union at Oxford University in England. And he said some other really disgusting things as well. He had debated Charlie Kirk. Aberonier, I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing it right, took part in a debate with Charlie Kirk at Oxford in May. So just in May, he had debated Charlie Kirk about the idea of toxic masculinity. And here he is several months later cheering the fact that the person he just debated has been murdered by being shot in the neck. Now, he did later apologize for that, but I think that's probably just because someone probably got to him and say, "Hey, you got to get ahead of this. This is gonna have consequences. When you're cheering for someone getting assassinated, that's beyond the line. You gotta walk this back." So he did come back and apologize and say how sorry he was that he said Charlie Kirk got shot, let's go. So that did happen, but he did say it. So we know that probably that's how he actually felt. Here's a conversation with a popular online streamer named Destiny. He's on the far right here. He's asked he said some really inflammatory things as well about the death of Charlie Kirk. And Piers Morgan over here, who's the host of the show, asked him, "Do you feel like you acted appropriately by saying," I'm not going to go into all that. You can go look at it for yourself. But here's what he says.
I think that liberals need to wake up and finally realize that if they're not willing to do it, it will never come down. If you wanted Charlie Kirk to be alive, Donald Trump shouldn't have been president for the second term. Every time he's in office, this happens. People joked about when Biden came in, it was so boring, nothing was going on. 7 out of 10 of the largest protests in American history have happened under Donald Trump. I think that liberals need to.
So basically, you can go watch this yourself. What he's saying is, and this is a direct quote, if you wanted Charlie Kirk to be alive, Donald Trump shouldn't have been president the second time. So what is that? Let's translate that. And he's a leftist, by the way. He's a hard, far left. What he's saying is, if you don't vote for the people we want, well, we're just going to have to kill you. This is what you deserve for opposing us. I don't know any way to interpret it. If you want Charlie Kirk to be alive, Donald Trump shouldn't have been president. And he said that on Piers Morgan's news program. This is insane. And this guy has thousands and thousands of followers. He's not a minor figure in the movement. So I could do videos like this. I don't want to get too far because I do want to get into open discussion, but I just want to show people how wicked, how evil, how depraved, how psychotic the left is, and how, by the way, you heard him say how it's a problem that Donald Trump is president. These people supported Joe Biden. These people we're talking about are supporters of the Democrat Party. Think of how evil they are. They're cheering the death of their political opponents, and that's a portion of the Democrat Party voter base is people who cheer the deaths of the people who disagree with them. So this is why a lot of people think that the left just simply can't have power, because they really are a hateful group. They're evil. They really do revel in the death of their political opponents. They're not this loving, kind, compassionate group of people who just like want to help the poor and want freedom and access for everybody and things. No, they are driven by hatred, rage, anger, and the destruction of anyone who doesn't think like they do. And they've made it clear that if you oppose them, they may not kill you themselves, but they won't be sad if you die. And actually, the world's probably better off without you. And again, I've just picked a few videos out of the really numerous that I found, kind of demonstrating this behavior. These kinds of basically, there are websites with thousands and thousands of people who literally went to social media and said things like this. Now, not all of them are. Most of them are not famous, but imagine being so twisted and blinded by your own hate and madness that you're going on social media and you're talking about how you're glad somebody got killed, or that basically it's justifiable based on what he believed. And these people, a lot of them are getting fired from their jobs, and they're wondering, wait, what? All I did was oppose Hitler, or one of the people who thinks just like Hitler did. Why am I getting fired for this? Somebody gets shot talking in a crowd about political ideas. People are going and killed in front of his family, in front of everyone who was watching, in front of the world, really, these days. And people are going on social media and just saying how happy they are that this happened and how much better the place the world is, as if this is a sane thing to do, as if this is just politics. If you don't agree with us, then you better watch out. You know, if you don't believe like our view on sexuality and gun rights and, you know, basically diversity in society and things like that, then pretty much you deserve to die, and no one should feel sorry for you. Oh, and by the way, let's vote for the Democrats, because those are the people who support our values. So this is where we are, folks. Yeah, it's pretty bad in my opinion. Now, again, I'm going to post the link. We don't have to talk about the Charlie Kirk situation. We can talk about pretty much anything else we want to talk about, the normal things on this channel, Christianity. But I wanted to put that out there. Oh, there was. I want to take a few minutes to do something real fast. I do. Because there was somebody who actually responded to me, and it's kind of only a few more minutes, folks, for people who want to join the chat. I'm not sure anyone does, but I had a post. I'm not going to read it just for time's sake. You can go read it. It's still there. So if you want to read it, but this is a kind of reply that I think is kind of basically representative of what I'm saying. First of all, he wasn't a leftist. Okay, I guess I don't know why he's saying that. We know he's a leftist now. He had a trans partner. He was living with a trans. I don't know if it was a biological male or female, but he was living with a trans individual who was his romantic partner. He was unaffiliated, whatever. Here it is. Kirk's views were wrong. He was a horrible person. Now, I know this person's an atheist, so a horrible person is really entirely subjective to these people. He's not objectively horrible. He's a horrible person in your opinion. To Charlie Kirk and the people who liked him, he was a great person. So who's right in your worldview? What's the objective standard you're using? A transphobe. So what does it mean to be a trans? Again, these are undefined terms. What does it mean to be a transphobe? Does it mean you believe men are men and women are women and you can't really change once you're born? Because that's what like 99% of people have believed for basically all of human history. And if you don't feel that way, it's because you have basically within your own mind. I'll just put it that way. Or maybe as someone who doesn't believe, trans people should be accommodated in society based on their self-delusion. Like, yeah, you're a man and you think you're a woman, but you can't actually compete against women in sports and like use the locker room and all that. That's for actual women. Like, you can think what you want about yourself. You're free to do that. So as a transphobe, and again, they call these trans rights, as if human rights can even exist within their worldview and framework. A racist, again, not explaining exactly what he said that was racist. If you believe that, white people shouldn't be forced to believe that diversity is good for society, is that a racist viewpoint? I don't know. Like, Charlie Kirk did make some comments like that. He was against mass immigration, which is a tool the Democrat Party uses to basically bolster their voter rolls. But again, he doesn't specify, so it's hard. A sexist, again, what does that even mean? And again, this is Johnny. I've talked to Johnny before. I don't know if he'll see this. I'm not going after Johnny. I'm just using his comment as a foil because I do think it's representative. And he once stated that gun deaths were necessary for the Second Amendment, that gun deaths were the price we had to pay for the Second Amendment. He cared more about guns and people's right to own them than the people dying from guns. So this particular individual, Johnny, he acts like there's first of all, the Second Amendment was put there by our founders. So it's part of the foundation of this country. I don't know if he knows why the Second Amendment is there. It's not so like rednecks can go hunting on the weekends. It's actually to defend ourselves from tyrannical forms of government was the main purpose. And yeah, that is actually a noble thing to want, to not be controlled by your own government, like a lot of places around the world. When a government takes over society and controls its citizens, the first thing it does is take away their right to defend themselves, which is the right to self-defense and firearms. So only the military has weapons, and if you cross them and challenge their power, they can easily go and kill you. So the founders of this country thought that the best defense against that was for all the citizens to be armed in case that situation arose, which it has many, 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 many times in history, especially in the last century when communist countries were, as I already, explained, killing millions of their own citizens for decades. So to say, and yes, Charlie Kirk, unfortunately, that is the sad price to pay, that for the citizens to own the guns, there are going to be people who misuse that right and use it just like all rights can be misused and abused. It's not something we want. Now, here's the thing. If leftists and their psychotic followers didn't go around murdering people, then, it wouldn't be as much of a problem. How about you just don't go kill your political opponents? And that'll, at least reduce the problems there. This is what they do. They go out, they hear someone say, well, I think we should have the right to self-defense. But, there will be a price. So they kill that person. And then they're like, oh, you should have supported our view. So they kill you, and then they propose a solution of taking your guns away because they're the ones who caused the problem, which is, again, part of their own hypocrisy and fraudulency. Yeah, but wanting people to have the right to defend themselves, not just against the government, but just against other criminals, but against criminals in society, isn't a bad thing. Now, there's a trade-off, and you could argue that there should be a balance, and we could argue what that balance is. But this guy just makes it look like, oh, Charlie Kirk, he just wants people to own guns so they can just go around and kill each other whenever they want. He cares more about the guns. Well, there's a reason that the ownership of guns is important in people like Charlie Kirk's mind, which is that it allows us to defend ourselves in the very likely case that the government becomes corrupt and wants to control us. Because evil people can get in control of the government and do things like that. And you don't want just the military to have the guns. You want to have a chance for yourself. So even if you disagree with that, even if you think it's silly, the fact is that wanting the people of a country to be able to defend themselves is not in itself a bad thing. You can argue it's misguided, that it's unrealistic, whatever, but the motivation is good. You want people to have the right to protect themselves against the evil forces in this world. He said empathy was a weakness. That being said, he didn't deserve. Okay, so he gets to it. He didn't deserve to die. I'm glad they caught the. Basically, oh yeah, he said something else here. The man who tried to kill Trump was a Republican. Okay, first of all, 2 leftists tried to kill Trump. Again, we see the left is the one engaging in political violence. Again, as if they make this out like Antifa or not. Excuse me. The right is just a bunch of Nazis going out there and just slaughtering people when they're the ones constantly firing the guns and killing people. By the way, this is totally false. You can go online and check that the second guy who tried to kill Trump at the golf course was not a Republican. He was a Republican up to a certain point in his life, but then he became unaffiliated, and then he clearly donated to Democrats and Democrat causes. Even he wasn't registered as a Democrat. So this is just straight up wrong. You can go check that yourself. I think I'll end it there. Yeah, this is, but basically, Charlie Kirk was a horrible person, sexist, racist, undefined terms. We can get into this. I'm gonna post the link, and we don't have to talk about Charlie Kirk. We can talk about other things. We can start with Charlie Kirk and go somewhere else. But I just want to put all that out there just so it's on the record. Hold on, let me get into the YouTube. All right. And unfortunately, because of something that someone did in my last stream, I'm going to have a real hard time just accepting people who I don't know who you are. Well, yeah, I mean, if you're have a coward who sits on a roof and snipes people from hundreds of yards away, like that leftist who killed Charlie Kirk, I mean, you're not going to have a chance to defend yourself. But again, if these evil people didn't do that, then we could own the guns and have our rights without having to worry about it. So how about leftists stop trying to kill their political opponents, and it won't be as big of an issue. Okay, where are we? All right, champ, I see you back there. You're going to have to like validate yourself some way. I can't just unfortunately, champ, I can't just let people up anymore because that privilege has been abused. So you're going to have to demonstrate who you are somehow. I know who Objective Ethics is. He's fine.
I can speak for Brooklyn. I can speak for Brooklyn Lou. I can vouch for him if he wants to jump on.
He hasn't joined, but Brooklyn Lou is fine as well. I know he's perfectly fine. What do you think, Objective? Should I let him up? He's sending a TikTok. Do you have a TikTok?
Yeah, I don't, but I think you should let the brother up. He wants to argue on behalf of God, so I don't think he's gonna say anything about Oh. And I have heard people freak out, but it sounds like he wants to debate the cosmological argument and the problem of evil coming from I'm assuming from a theistic standpoint. I don't know the guy, but that's the impression I'm under.
Okay, I see his TikTok. He looks like a real person. All right, I'm gonna take a risk and let him up. Let's hope nothing bad happens.
No,
Hey,
man,
champ, how
I'm
you
not
doing?
a troll, man. What's up?
Okay, yeah, you can't trust anybody these days, unfortunately.
No, I feel you. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically on this channel, we're having it's just an open discussion. I discuss some things, but we don't have to discuss that. We can discuss other things. We can just, is there anything?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, Objective Ethics joined first. So the way I do it is,
I don't mind. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, well, let's let him speak and provide some thoughts because I've said a lot. So I'm going to give you two a chance. So let's start with Objective Ethics. Yeah, say whatever is on your mind, and then we'll move to Champ.
Well, I just, I want to start by saying, just for the record, because I don't know who's been going back and forth between you and James. There's a little back and forth with videos and reaction videos, and I was involved in the chats there and on one of the videos. So I just want to clear the air and just make sure that everybody knows for the record that I am I've spoken very highly of A's philosophy, even though I disagree with a lot of things he says, as I'm an agnostic and he's a theist, a Christian in particular. So we don't see eye to eye on a lot of things, but we've always had very respectful discussions, and A's promotes respectful conversations. So I just think that's the most important thing and the starting point. If you don't start there, you're not going to get anywhere. So for the record, I just want to put that out there. And the last situation that happened, where you went onto the gentleman's channel. That was a hot mess. I was embarrassed to be a part of it, frankly. I don't know what happened there. You know, I know that that gentleman is normally very polite as well. Maybe this whole Charlie Kirk, this politic things is getting people all fired up. And I don't agree with a lot of things you're saying about Charlie being a good person or whatever. I didn't agree with pretty much anything Charlie said. However, I think this is an absolute tragedy. And I think the people celebrating this are vile, disgusting, inhumane. I can't think of other words. You know, I know religious people use the word evil. I don't believe in evil, but it's, you know, just absolutely the most unhumane thing that I can think of is to celebrate the death of an innocent man. And even though he said things I don't agree with, he certainly did not deserve to be mowed down in front of his family and thousands of people, college kids in particular, who are possibly going to be suffering from PTSD from literally witnessing that happen in front of their face. I mean, this is a real scary time that we are in this country. And as I think Ace probably knows very well by now, I am actually an independent centrist. I can't stand this two-tier. I mean, this I can't think what the term is right now for some reason, but we have basically a two systems
divided society. Yeah, two-party
it is
system,
very
whatever.
divided. Two-party system. God, I don't know why I couldn't come up with that. I'm sorry. I had a long day. I'm just getting back to work. And so I'm trying to recover from surgery. And now I'm recovering from surgery and work all at the same time. But it's good to be back. But anyway, yeah, this two-party system is so broken. It is the us versus them. The whole religious thing, the religion thing is very divisive. That's already this big us versus them mentality. And now we have it in politics as well. And we need to have a third option for people to find some middle ground as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, I just wanted to open up by saying that.
All right, before Champ goes, I just want to say I really do appreciate the kind words, objective ethics. I know we disagree strongly, but I also want to say that every time I've interacted with you, the conversation has been very civil and respectful. And you're actually one of the most civil, respectful people I've ever dialogued with, and I've dialogued with a lot, even though I disagree with you strongly on a number of issues. So that's commendable. All right, let's get to Champ, and let's see. Yeah, what's on your mind, Champ? Just anything you want to say. It doesn't have to be about anything I've said. But
Yeah.
where are you, and what do you got?
Yeah, man. I just like debating God mostly. Sometimes I debate morality and free will on TikTok, but that's not really like my main debate I like to do. I like to just debate about God. I don't really debate politics. I don't care about politics.
So I just want to be very clear. You come from a theist perspective. Do you have a particular religion, or do you just like to debate the general idea of the existence of God?
Yeah, I don't hold to religion. I just think that God is a maximally great being, kind of like Platinga's idea of God, if you're familiar with that.
I'm not the most familiar with Platinga, but I know who you're talking about, and I'm generally familiar with that. So this should be an interesting
Right.
thing. I think maybe you can have, because objective ethics is a skeptic, and so is Lou, who we'll get to next. So maybe
Yeah.
you all can have a productive dialogue and kind of run your arguments against each other and see what you think. But all right, thank you, Champ. But let's get to, so Brooklyn Lou has graced us with his presence. That's very nice. What's on your mind, Lou?
Just saw you out there and was actually doing some editing myself, but I saw you live. I know you had we had a little bit of engagement on your critique of my little video, and I heard you talking about Charlie Kirk, so I figured I would listen in and join in.
Yeah, so all right, we have some ideas on the table. If anyone, again, we don't have to talk about Charlie Kirk, but if y'all want to kind of just touch on that before we move to just general arguments about what our beliefs are, maybe we can do that. Like, what are y'all feeling about this? I'm hoping that we can agree that this was a tragedy that shouldn't have happened. I think y'all, Objective and Lou, are pretty much on the rational side of the skeptics. So, what are you thinking, Lou?
I think that I mean, I literally posted a short about 5 minutes after I heard about Charlie Kirk being shot and passing away, and I was totally saddened by it. So I'm not one of these people who celebrates the death of anybody, period. But that obviously doesn't mean I agree with Charlie Kirk, right? I mean, I don't. But I was disheartened when that happened. So I don't see it as a. I mean, I think I see it differently than you do, because it seems like you see it as one side versus the other, and I don't see it that way. I see it as there's a lot of crazy people out there that are radicalized and do crazy things, and this was one of them. And that's kind of what I see. I don't think he represents people that are Democrats or people that are progressive. I don't think I know he doesn't represent me. So
yeah, okay, well, that's good. And, that's fair. I think there's an argument that I've talked to some people, and there are people in my life who are Democrat, liberal, and I think most people are on the same page that you're right. This guy was crazy. Whatever his beliefs were, he was, did something that was wrong, essentially. And but there are those out there, and we need to be aware of this, who are celebrating it. So we can't just say that everyone's on the same page. There is this element of our society that thinks this was a good thing, and I think that's dangerous and needs to be exposed. Whatever percentage of our society it is, whether it's 1% or less than 1%, even it's there. And I think that's even if it's, let's say it's 0.1%, that's so wait, what's 1% of 300 million? 3 million? So we're talking hundreds of thousands of people, even if it's like 0.1% out there who are cheering on the assassination of a political figure. But
now, what I got to ask you, I think it's terrible, but what do you suppose should be done about that?
Well, we should I mean, you're right. What is the solution to this? I think that for me, when I think about who these individuals are and the way they think about things and how I think they are dangerous, essentially, I think about what is it that they want? If they want the people that represent them to be put in positions of power and control society. So I don't want people running society who represent those people. So in my opinion, I think part of the solution is political. Make sure that these people don't get represented in the government. So my solution, one of them, is to vote against the people they support. So that's what I intend to do personally.
Well, I think that's a good way of seeing it. I mean, I agree with that. I don't understand like how you would go about criminalizing free speech. I mean, Charlie Kirk himself seemed to say over and over he supported free speech. So if I'm a person who thinks it was good that this happened, all right, am I not allowed to express that? Because that would be, criminalizing free speech just because I don't like that speech. And that would be, to me, I wouldn't go for that. I'm against, the thought that people are celebrating his death. Already said I'm not, but I mean, if someone goes out and decides that they were happy that this happened, they're not criminals. They haven't done anything that would be, they should be locked up or anything.
That's a really interesting question. What is the line where something? See, let me just say this. This is kind of tangentially related. I was driving around very recently, and I saw someone with a bumper sticker, and the first word was "kill," and the second two words were somebody's name. I won't see who that person's name was, and I thought to myself, it was not Charlie Kirk or Donald Trump. I will say that. But it's someone who a lot of people know and who is sort of a political figure. And I thought to myself, is that even legal? Can you just put a bumper sticker on that advocates murder? That's literally what it said. And I thought to myself, maybe this person should be arrested. I don't know. It just struck me as like, should that be legal? It's a good question. I will say, I think there should be consequences for people who basically openly advocate that kind of stuff. I don't know if it's being put in jail, but I think they should certainly be ostracized from society and punished in some way.
Well, I do think if you start, people are starting to tell people to kill other people. Yeah, I think that's going over the line.
Well, there is actually a law that's already on the books. It has been for a long time. And I don't think it might be called inflammatory speech, but I can't remember the actually specific definition. But essentially, it's the concept of it is unlawful to yell fire in a crowded movie theater, for example. That's actually illegal because of the consequences. You know what I mean? So there are laws on the books that do regulate free speech, so to speak. So free speech is not an all-encompassing term that means you can just say whatever you want to. There's also laws against making threats, verbal threats to people, which I think kills X person. It sounds to me very much like a threat. You know, you cannot go to somebody and tell them, I'm going to punch your lights out. If somebody comes up to me, okay, you know, I've been involved in working in security, bouncer, and self-defense and stuff. So I know for a fact that I know these laws that if somebody comes up to me and says, I'm going to punch you in the face, I am at that point legally allowed to strike them first, to initiate physical combat in self-defense. It's a preemptive strike, but it's actually self-defense. So there are laws that regulate speech and because they recognize that speech can be a form of violence. Now, I am not a proponent of what people are saying politically, where certain speech is harmful or hateful. There certainly is negative speech. There are harmful ideas that get promoted, and I do agree with that. But just saying something that you don't agree with your political party for their particular views about something, that is not necessarily harmful, in my opinion. So there's a real gray area there. Where are we going to start drawing that? How are we going to start including what's in the gray area into what's actually already in the black and white area that's already illegal?
I think the calling for violence is where the issue is. I don't think there's any problem with people saying, I don't like that person. I don't like this person. I don't like what this group stands for. None of that to me would be unusual. It's just you're going to have to parse out, what is calling for the murder of somebody else. Right? But what I see after the Charlie Kirk thing is like this frenzy of people wanting other people to get fired, stuff like that. And then when you see what they wanted them to get fired for, it wasn't that they murdered anybody. It wasn't that they killed anybody. It's looking like, well, they said something that someone didn't like. And that to me is pure freedom of speech. I'm allowed to say things people don't like, right?
Yes, you're allowed to say it. And when it comes to our constitutional rights, see, we all know that the First Amendment guarantees several rights, and one of them is freedom of speech. But that's only from government interference. It's not from interference from your social circle or from your employer, unless your state has you have a local law protecting you from being fired for such things. So the Constitution only protects you from getting arrested by the federal government if you say something that is that is controversial. But in our country, go ahead.
In the Charlie Kirk situation, what would you consider to be off limits? What kind of speech would be like, oh, that goes way beyond? We need to arrest people. We need to fire people. What would it be?
I don't think anyone should be arrested. Let me just go. I haven't seen anyone say anything that deserves being arrested, but I have seen a number of things that I believe merit being fired from your job. And I will say one of the if I could summarize the idea, it's that he deserved to die. I don't see any problem with someone being fired for saying something along those lines, that either he deserved to die or that this is a good thing. If I see someone say,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
go ahead. No, I'm done. I'm done.
Okay, I'm just to play devil's advocate here. I am not condoning any of this behavior. I do believe that we should search for nonviolent answers to everything. Um, the the problem with what you're saying though is saying that somebody deserves to die. Like, if they are talking about things that are very harmful and very restrictive, very sexist, very racist, very bigoted, however you want to define it, and some people agree, some people disagree, but if there are people who are taking it that way and they say those ideas are deserve to be stamped out because they're harmful, and so inherently the person who's promoting those ideas maybe got what they deserved, kind of a thing. I mean, is that really such a terrible thing? I mean, I'm just trying to, like I said, I'm just trying to look at this from the other side. And like I said, I mean, I don't know, dancing in the streets and throwing parties and singing songs and some of the videos that you showed, that's way over the top. But just the simple statement, getting fired from your job, because you said, well, he got what he deserved or something like that. I don't know if that's necessarily. Now, again, I'm a former business owner and I am a big advocate for the rights of business owners. And I think this country has gone too far to tell business owners what they have to do with who they have to hire and how they have to do this or that. I mean, it's gone way over the top. Being a business owner is a shitty deal because you have so many restrictions and regulations that you have to adhere to, that it's all designed to keep small businesses down and to help corporations thrive, basically. And so, telling a business owner you can or can't fire somebody for something, I have a hard time with that, just on general principle, to be honest with you. But I'm just trying to look at this from the other side about saying somebody got what they deserved. I mean, if somebody gets beat up because they go around and start fights in bars all the time, they keep getting beat up, their buddies are going to be like, yeah, you got what you deserved. Are they wrong for saying that?
Here's my problem. I think when you say things like that, what you are doing is creating an environment that basically normalizes deadly political violence. And that is not a place I want to see America go. I think that when your words basically advocate for the idea that if you hold certain political views, and obviously we're all going to, people are going to disagree with each other about what's right and wrong, we can't have this mindset of, well, you thought this, therefore it's a good thing that someone took you out. I think that's an extremely dangerous place to go for our society.
I agree on principle what you're saying. I do, because I think that political violence is a real independent category that needs to be considered, because it gets massive, large numbers of people to do things that individual people may not be motivated to do. You know what I mean? It's this group think, and there's a lot of inherent dangers to that. However, as an example, so there's a lot of things that you said about transgender people in your opening statement that I just blatantly disagree with. I've looked into the science behind this, and I'm not a biologist, but I know that there's scientific information out there that refutes everything you claimed about a man being a woman and stuff. Now, I'm not going to get into about an argument with you about transgender stuff. If you want to use people's pronouns or tell men they can't be women, or however you want to voice that, I completely disagree with you, not based just on my empathy for these people, but because scientifically, science is actually on my side. But you have a right to say those things, in my opinion. Now, the people on the left don't like me any more than the people on the right do, because I'm in the middle. And I will agree with some things, but I will also fight for your right to oppose me verbally. You know what I mean? So I think you should have a right to voice those things, even though I disagree with you. How far do we take that into this political sphere, whether we're talking about political violence or political anything else?
Here's something I was just thinking about. I grew up in New York, and I saw and was involved in different fights, things where people, threw down physically, right? And hearing people say, I'm going to unalive you and that sort of thing was almost commonplace in the streets. Okay. Certainly it didn't always mean literally the person wanted to kill you, right? But these are words that were chosen inappropriately. See, and we go down this road, like, obviously I heard people say Joe Biden should have been dead. I heard that. All right. Charlie Kirk once said that Joe Biden should get the death penalty. So he was for the execution of Joe Biden. Now, I didn't think that Charlie Kirk should be arrested and put in prison for that. All right. Freedom of speech for me goes really far. All right. And it has to go far. Now, I think there could be a line drawn, and that's why I said a threat to kill someone, I think, is probably over the line. Legally, I'm speaking about. But other than that, freedom of speech is a foundational principle of our society.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But like I keep saying, you can say what you want, but I can also respond how I want. Again, I'm talking about peacefully. If I'm a business owner, and it might not even be that I disagree with what what someone is saying. It might just be like, oh, that's bad for business. For someone to go on if they trace this back to my business, it's going to look bad. I'm going to lose sales. So even just for that very reason of I might lose sales, it might be in my best interest to fire this person. You know what I'm saying?
I think freedom of speech has to go for everybody, though, not just one side or the other. It has to be for everybody.
Of course. Yeah, but I think what people on the right are saying, and so there's, like you said, Lou, there's the responses to the Charlie Kirk thing, and then we have this right-wing, basically witch hunt going on, trying to get all these people fired from their jobs, and some of them are being successful. And the left is complaining about how, the right's doing cancel culture now. Well, here's the thing, and the right doesn't believe in free speech. I'm hearing this. Well, yes, we do, but we don't believe that there should be freedom from consequences of free speech. If you say something, society has the right to react, and people around you have the right to react to what you say. And it may not be how you like, but you had a right to say it. You said it, and the government did take you and put you in jail, but other people around you, they can react how they want to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with people reacting. I don't agree with a lot of the reactions. So be it.
Yeah. I guess what I would like to see is for people who disagreed with Charlie Kirk and their initial reaction is along the lines of he kind of got what he was asking for. Maybe just reflect a little bit. Just ask yourself if that comes from a position of sympathy and understanding of how society should operate. This idea of this violence is sort of justified. I don't know. I think it's just, I'm not sure if there's a legal solution, but I do think that there needs to be some soul searching for everybody at this point, and this is a good time to do it. I think this is
for that. I'm for everybody to think about, the things that they're saying and the things that might incite someone to violence. I'm for all of that. And I just don't think it comes from one side or the other. I think it's something that everybody has to look at.
I think those are wise words, Lou. I don't know if we wanted to pivot. Now, you did mention, Lou, that you had watched my video, which is a response to your video about how you would make a better world than God.
Yeah.
So let's hear your ideas. If you want to go there, we can go there now about how.
It's up to you. Whatever you want to talk about.
I think this is interesting because I see a lot of skeptics out there talking about how bad the world is that God created, and I think that's very intriguing that they think they know how better to create a better world than an omnipotent, omniscient, all-wise being. So why don't you give your ideas about how God has created an imperfect world, or assuming God exists, of course, which you probably don't, but
yeah,
if God did create this world, why did he do such a bad job?
Well, first off, I know that you and Objective, and hopefully Champ now knows that when I express something, I'm just giving an opinion in my view. All right. I'm not looking at it as everybody has to think like I do. Okay. But to me, the concept of being all loving, right, which is what I always hear the Christian God is all loving, right? I think that would include protecting and providing a decent place for his creation to live, whether or not they happen to have eaten of a fruit 8,000 years ago, because that was two individuals. But things like the devil, all right, I don't see any reason why the devil should be running around. So if I were God, I would get rid of the devil. That's what I said. I would get rid of cancer and other illnesses that plague humanity and natural disasters. Now, obviously, I'm not a God. Obviously, I don't know everything. But I think most people would agree with me. If they were God, they would do that as well. Even you, A's, I think you might get rid of cancer if you were a God.
Yeah, well, I can see. I think your heart is in the right place. Now, I have my response. I don't know, Champ. Are you even there, Champ? I know you said you had to step away. Are you gone? Are you there, Champ? Right now, I'm not. Okay, it looks like Champ isn't here. I was interested to hear, like, because he's another theist, so I didn't want to just hog all the airtime. Here's the thing. Let's just go like one by one. And objective, feel free to toss your ideas in as well whenever you feel appropriate. But I think this is interesting because I think that a big problem, a big impediment to people coming to God is just kind of looking around and being like, what's God doing here? What's the idea? Like if God is so wise, why did he create the universe this way where, everything's killing us? Bad things happen to good people, all of that. So just going by the examples you gave, the devil. So the devil, as I said, is a spiritual being, right? So, but the devil has free will. So here's my thing: if God was to get rid of the devil, basically what God is saying is, I'm just going to annihilate. So how would God get rid of the devil? What is the mechanism by which God would get rid of the devil? Like, would he just snap his fingers and the devil would disappear into thin air, or what were you thinking?
Well, biblically, the story goes he's going to get rid of the devil. So it's just a matter of when, if you're into the Bible. All right. I say, if I were God, I would do it right now. That's really it, because God is going to get rid of the devil, according to the Bible.
Go ahead.
The problem here, if I may just interject something to just really give you something to chew on here, brother. The problem here is that historically, when you look at the scholarship behind this, and you look at the actual evidence that we have, Judaism evolved over time. The people were living in the land of Canaan. They were a polytheistic nation. They left Canaan. They took some of the Canaanite gods, including Yahweh being one of them. El was one of them. Asherah was one of them, the goddess Asherah. Okay, so they took these gods with them initially, and over time, as this Canaanite tribe of Semitic people eventually became known as Hebrews, and then eventually became known as Israelites, and eventually became known as Jews, this religion evolved over time. So there came a point during what's known as the Persian period, around 500 before the Common Era, okay, in the middle of that 6th century, and Zoroastrianism was the Persian religion. And the Zoroastrians, King Cyrus the Great, when you look at the Old Testament, the significant majority of the Old Testament is written around this period. The Babylonian exile including the time of the Assyrians when they took out Israel, and then you get the Babylonian exile, the diaspora, then you get the Persian period, right? And then obviously towards the end of the Old Testament, you get the transition to the New Testament, which is then the Greco-Roman period, right? So in this historical transition, you get this massive Zoroastrian influence. And in Zoroastrianism, there is one God. A lot of people misunderstand that as being dualistic, okay? But the whole concept of this devil that we're talking about right now is drawn from the dualism that's in Zoroastrianism. It wasn't there in the oldest books of the Old Testament. Okay, the Satan, Lucifer, known as the accuser, was one of the members of the divine council. He was basically like an attorney, so to speak. You know, Job is a great example of what I'm talking about here. And so the devil works with God. He works for God. He's not the antithesis to God. That does not come along until after the Persian influence, where you have Spentimanu and Angramanu, which represent the truth and the dirge, or the truth and the lie. But Ahura Mazda is the only uncreated being in Zoroastrianism. It's the oldest true monotheistic religion we actually know of. It's not a dualistic religion. The dualism is between the lie and the truth, which are divinations, if you will, of creation. They're a natural intrinsic part of creation, because once Ahura Mazda created, within creation was the truth and the lie inherently. And you see this influence bleed into Judaism. Okay, so now you have Satan getting towards a New Testament. Now Satan suddenly represents something. Satan represents evil and the antithesis to good and love and all this other thing. So you have to embrace this transition when you're trying to think about this God concept coming from the Christian and the Jewish perspective, and to deal with it from that angle, because that's the real angle you're actually wrestling with. So if you're going to just pinpoint a specific time and say, okay, well, this is the time period in this theology that I want to start looking at the role the devil's playing, you have to understand there's a massive history that you're just hand waving away that predates all that. And you're now cherry picking basically the point in time that you are familiar with. So that's the basis of your very argument. I think it's kind of important to keep that in mind, because when you're talking about God being the creator, you're actually referring to a time when God was actually El, and Yahweh was El's son, and Asherah was Yahweh's mother, and you don't even realize all that probably.
Well, okay, so we've got Brooklyn Lou is dealing more with the theoretical idea of God and the devil, which is more like just not really related to exact facts about how the religion developed. And then we have objectives points, which is more about knowledge of history and what exactly happened. So it's kind of like two different conversations. I do kind of want to challenge a little bit of what objective was saying. I think that there is just some straight up factually incorrect things being said about the development of the Jewish religion, which would obviously lead into the Christian religion. First of all, I think that from what I understand, and I don't know everything. I'm not a trained scholar. The Book of Job is apparently chronologically was the first book written that became part of the biblical canon. And Satan does make an appearance in the Book of Job. So
yeah, that's not the oldest book, but go ahead.
Okay, so that would be a point of contention. I have always heard, maybe not from everybody, that Job is the oldest book in terms of when it was actually written in time, in history. Now, objective is saying that's not true. Okay, so I would have to look at the scholarship of that, but from what I've seen, I do believe the scholarly, at least a significant number of scholars do hold to that position.
So Job's scholarship says that Job was written around 350 BCE. The oldest book would be Amos, written around 780 BCE.
I guess it depends on where you're looking. Hold on, I'm going to do some quick scholarship here.
I'm sure you're going to get stuff all over the board, but this is by a recognized Jewish scholar, Matt Baker.
I think you're going to get different information and end up concluding nobody really knows for sure.
Yeah, I actually think Lou is right there. I think that no one really knows is probably the best answer. But to me, I do know that at the very least, historically up till, I guess, I don't know, maybe it's more recently, scholars have changed their mind. As long as I've been listening, I've always heard people saying that Job is the oldest book in the Bible. But maybe the scholarship has changed. I will have to look into that. let me just say this. If it's true that Job is the oldest book or one of the oldest books in terms of when it was composed, I think that would go a long way to refute the idea that Satan is the result of Zoroastrian influence. So I'll say that. Now, again, it would need to be confirmed, and I would have to do some research, and I wish I had done my research. But let me also say that when it comes to the idea that the Jews, the Israelites, whatever you want to call them, were a polytheistic people, and they originally had several deities, which they eventually conceptually united into one deity, which is El or Yahweh. I think that is really Reddit level, like, atheist propaganda. I just don't think it's supported by the scholarship. And let me say why. I think that, well, you have the Hebrew language. Yahweh is the tetragrammaton. It's basically, Yahweh is just words from the Hebrew language. It's I am that I am. It's literally a sentence. So you're not going to get God's
Okay.
Let me say, you're not going to get God's name being a Hebrew sentence being inherited from some polytheistic tribal religion and their language. So how do you respond to that?
Because where did the Hebrews come from? Do you not know they came from Canaan? It even says in the Bible they came from Canaan. So
Right,
they're Semitic people. The language is a Semitic language, right?
That's okay. That's true, but nevertheless, it's not like Yahweh has its etymological origins in the Canaanite language. It comes from the idea of
we have the archaeological evidence of Yahweh in the Canaanite pantheon. The whole story of El and Yahweh and Asherah is existing in tablets, in cuneiform writing, from the and also in the Canaanite.
So there was let me ask you this: there was a Canaanite god named Yahweh.
That's correct. He was a son of El. So El was the primary god. The god was El, and then Asherah was God's consort. Yahweh was their child. One of their 70 gods was one of the children. He had 70 children. Yahweh was one of them. Yahweh in the story ends up defeating El and marrying his mother, Asherah. And you see all these names in the oldest parts of the Hebrew Bible. El, Asherah, and Yahweh are all there. And then Yahweh doesn't even show up at the beginning. It's El. And then eventually he says, I am. And then eventually he says, my name is Yahweh. And he even says, Jacob, and I think, was it Jacob and Joseph, did not know me by my name. Remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. Yes, I believe that's in Genesis 6. But here's my contention. What is the tetragrammaton? Yahweh is basically a short form of, basically a derivative of the tetragrammaton, which is, if you know what the tetragrammaton is, the 4 Hebrew letters YHWH. So you can see how Yahweh would come from that. And YHWH comes from Yod He Vod He, which literally translates to I am that I am. Or some scholars translate it the eternally self-existent one, but very literally Yod He Vod He means I am that I am. So I'm having a really hard time accepting that Yahweh was this pre-existing Canaanite god who had a name that is basically derived from Hebrew letters. I don't know. It seems like a stretch to me.
I want to explain what my understanding is, and definitely not an expert on these ancient writings. But through the years, what I've gathered is that the tetragrammaton YHWH is just the name of God without the vowels, because these people revered the name so much that they didn't want to even say it. It was too holy. I mean, this is what I learned, all right? And the thing with Yahweh being part of the divine council, that seems to be accurate. Now, you're not going to hear that from a Christian scholar, I mean, obviously, they're not going to say that, because that means that Yahweh was fabricated and that Yahweh wasn't the only God, right? So the fact is, though, is that the Hebrew God of Israel, Yahweh, came into existence before the Jewish religion did. Okay, and that's a problem, all right, for the Christian view. Now, I mean, you could try to get around it, but it's definitely a difficult thing, because Yahweh existed prior to the writings of the Old Testament. And in the Old Testament, you see glimpses of there being other gods. Yahweh himself seems to be jealous of other gods. Right? And one I remember distinctly is Baal. You know, Yahweh was very jealous of Baal. And, you know, none of that makes real sense unless there was a real understanding that these other gods did exist. So that's my take on it. I think that the facts seem to indicate, yes, Yahweh existed before Judaism, and he existed in Canaan as part of that Canaanite pantheon. That seems to me to be the most accurate.
The other thing to think about, because what Joe is saying is absolutely right. I think, I'm sorry, Joe, Jesus Christ, I'm sorry, Lou. What Lou is saying is very intelligent, because I agree with 100%. But the thing to keep in mind too is, I've heard a lot of theists, Christians or Jews or whatever, say that no, these other references to these other gods, Baal and Marduk and Asherah, these were just idols. They weren't actually gods. But that does not match up to the texts themselves. For example, the Exodus myth, where Moses and Aaron go and have this wizard stool with the Pharaoh's wizards, and the Pharaoh's wizards are able to call on their false gods, quote unquote, and get their staffs to turn into snakes. But Moses's or Aaron's staff, I think it was actually, turned into a more powerful snake and ate their snakes. So these gods had powers. It wasn't just statues that had no power to them. So that's just doesn't make sense to the text. And just a really quick touch on what you said before, I pulled out my laptop here. Now I've got the book that I keep on my coffee table. I've referenced it before in our discussions. That's by scholar Matt Baker. So I've got the receipts right there to back up what I'm saying. However, when I do a web search, I'm seeing right here, the book of Job consists of 2 layers, the most recent of which was written after the Babylonian exile, which is what I just was literally what confirmed what Matt Baker was saying. That's at answers.com. So this is not a Reddit level claim that Job is not even close to the oldest book in the Bible, and was in fact written after the Babylonian exile. And if you remember what I said, it was written during the Persian period. Well, what was after the Babylonian exile? The Persian period. So it seems like there's plenty of sources that agree with what I'm saying. Now, I am not a biblical scholar, and I'm not a historian, and I'll be honest about that. This is not an outlier Reddit level anything. There is scholarship that agrees with me on this, and I could cite a number of scholars that I've heard talk about this, including scholars that are actually theists, such as a Dan McClellan, for example, Dr. Dan McClellan, PhD, biblical scholar.
So yeah, I understand that there are scholars. I want to. B.S. Lewis here has said that Deuteronomy 32:8-9 proves that there's evidence of polytheism in the Jewish religion. When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of man, he set the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the sons of Israel. For the Lord's portion is his people. Jacob is the allotment of his inheritance. And it looks like a number of translations do translate it this way. Almost all of them, in fact. Okay, here it says Jehovah, ASV. I don't know, to be honest, I'm not a Hebrew scholar, so I can't say what the proper translation is, but it looks like, let's just say it might say, for God's portion is his, for El's portion is his people, or Yahweh's portion is his people.
But that doesn't make sense with the text if you really break that down. God, this is an inheritance. You don't give an inheritance to yourself.
Mm-hmm. And that inheritance would be, biblically, would be the Israelites, the God's chosen people.
I don't know.
That would be, see, I understand it as God, Yahweh, became the regional God of the Israelites.
All right, can someone point out to me, where are there multiple gods here? Like, what is there? Is it implied? Is it explicit? What am I looking for here?
It's implied, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I'd have to look into it. I'm not saying that there's nothing here. I'm just saying I don't want to waste time just kind of trying to figure something out that I haven't looked into. So to me, I'm just reading it. It seems ambiguous. I can see how an apologist would be like, there's nothing here, but at the same time, I haven't investigated these verses so thoroughly.
I want to ask you this, because I respect that you're being honest and thinking things through. I've thought of this a lot, and that is just the fact that in the Bible, you see quite often, you will see God talking about other gods. You know, he'll talk about Baal. That comes to my mind right away. All right, and the people worshipped Baal, all right, and God speaks about Baal, right, and it just strikes me as kind of weird that God, who is the creator of all things, if he was one, would even pay attention to the Baal. It just seems like, yeah, he was talking about something that he thought was real.
There are, okay, so let me try and give let's say that there is Baal. There are these demonic entities that are kind of like the devil, like sort of like, I think what might be going on here is that when it comes to spiritual matters, people will call things they understand God. And that's probably what these other cultures were doing. They were calling things God, and therefore God referred to them as gods. But I think the implication is that they're false gods, and that they shouldn't be worshipped, because they are exactly that. They're things that people think are God, but they really aren't. So that could serve as an explanation as to why they're called God in the scriptures themselves, by God.
Yeah, but I always found this after I left Christianity. When I read the book now, I accept the words far better, because I'm not looking to make excuses. It does say God, gods. I mean, you know, now it's a fake god. Oh, it's a statue. Oh, it's some sort of a devilish god. But it does line up with that pantheon, the Canaanite pantheon.
Yeah, even when you go to Exodus 20, which is where the 10 Commandments are given, it says the first commandment is, you shall have no other gods before me. Now you can look at that and say, oh, God's recognizing that there's other gods.
Yeah.
But another way of looking at it is that, yes, God is talking about other gods, but that the reason you can't have other gods is because they're imaginary. They aren't real. They have no substance, power, or life in and of themselves. So,
yeah, but if they don't have any substance or power or life in themselves, how are they turning their staves into snakes?
Well,
how are they interfering? How is the devil interfering with people? If he, you know, how is God real? How is Yahweh real if you go by that?
Well,
Yahweh's not interfering in the world that we know of.
Well, not that we can directly observe. It'd have to be observed by its effects. And some people do say they see God, so we have to take that into consideration. But wait, what was the point that Objective made a point that I was going to respond to?
Well, I just wanted to, when we have this discussion, I'd like to focus on the problem of evil, and I didn't mean to make such a detraction. I really would.
Okay.
The point that I was bringing about for that is that we're talking about is a dualism that has been inserted into the theology. So when you're trying to argue for the problem of evil, what you're wrestling with is this dualism that is inherent to what we're looking at now. But the dualism, there wasn't this dualism existing prior to this. It wasn't the same thing. It was more like I don't have the best example because I'm not.
It was a
I
development,
was really
or
prepared for this. But I do want to just address Dirty Varmint in his comment. Once again, he's misquoting me. I didn't say anything about the Torah today, and I stand by what I said before. I said that the Torah was mostly written. I didn't say the entire thing was written. I literally read off out of this book, so I'll just read it again for Dirty Varmint's sake. Deuteronomy, as far as the Torah goes, the first 5 books of the Bible, Deuteronomy was the first book written around 624 before the Common Era. Genesis and Exodus were written during the Babylonian exile. And then Leviticus was the last book. And this is, you're talking about the J and E source, the D source, and the P source if you're into that particular hypothesis, right? So this is basically what the scholars are saying. And Job, according to the scholars, and that's not only the book I've got next to me, but I just read it off the internet, is much later than that. What was that? Job right around 350 or so before the Common Era. So yeah, and again, the thing to remember when we're dating these is, like I have to clarify for Dirty Varmint's sake and everybody else's, that does not mean this just poofed out of thin air at those dates. We're talking about the final version. So obviously there's oral tradition or maybe even written texts that we don't have that go much further back. We have no evidence of that. So that doesn't mean that this is where it all just began. So to be clear about that.
I think I have a lot to say, but Champ and Eastern Thomas have been very patient. So I just want to make sure they're not feeling excluded. So let's give them a chance to address anything that they feel like they've wanted to say even though there's a lot that's been said and they haven't spoken. So let's give them a couple minutes just to kind of air their thoughts, and then we can kind of go back to where objective ethics was going to go. So Champ, and then Eastern Thomas. But Champ, do you have anything that you wanted to contribute to what's being said here?
Oh yeah, I just got here. You guys were discussing the problem of evil, right?
Yeah, we were discussing the problem of evil, and then I guess I got kind of interested in some of the claims that were being made by objective ethics, and then it kind of sidetracked into that. But we can go back to the problem of evil if you want. Yeah, just basically, Brooklyn Lou had put out a video a week or a couple weeks ago about how he would make the world better than God did. And three of the things he would do would be to get rid of the devil, to basically cure all the diseases that plague mankind, and to eliminate natural disasters. So that's kind of the basis of the conversation. So maybe if you want to comment on that, and then Eastern Thomas, you don't have to comment on that specifically, but let's give Champ first because he's been waiting a long time.
Yeah, I'm curious if Eastern is a Christian by chance.
Yes, I am a Catholic.
Oh, yeah, that's cool. I actually have an interesting way to run the problem of evil. Maybe I could run it against him at some point. That'd be fun.
Certainly.
Or do you want to do it right now? Is that okay? It doesn't take long. It's only a couple of questions.
So you want to run an argument against the problem of evil against one of the skeptics on the panel?
One of the Christians, yeah.
Oh, wait.
Okay.
Wait, quick point of clarification. I thought you said earlier that you do.
Yeah, I believe in God.
that
I know how to solve the problem of evil. I just want to see if he does.
Oh, okay. All right. Let's play this game. Let's see what Eastern Thomas has.
Yeah, sure.
And also, by the way, Eastern Thomas, I know you have a tendency to kind of answer things for 5 minutes first. Just try to make your responses direct to what he's asking. I hate to say that, but
Sure.
let's try to do that.
It won't take long at all. In fact, my questions are usually like yes or no, right? I usually ask very simple questions. Do you think it's possible for a human to never sin?
Do I think it's possible for a human to never sin? Only if God unmeritoriously gives them the grace not to sin.
I guess I should rephrase it. Is it logically possible? I'm sorry.
Without the grace of God, no. It's not logically possible.
That's interesting. Yeah, so I could probably just formalize a syllogism that says that Jesus did it with a human nature.
Well, I would say in regards to why Jesus didn't sin, Jesus, I would argue, was God. And so even though his human nature was distinct from his divine nature, he still possessed the beatific vision in his human nature, and was still consubstantial with his divine nature.
I would say answering no is probably the worst thing you could say. So you're saying it's impossible for us to not sin, correct?
It's not impossible for us to not sin, but it's impossible unless God grants a person the grace not to sin.
What do you mean by grants us the grace? What do you mean by that?
Well, God can grant someone a certain grace that gives them the freedom to ultimately seek God and not to sin. But again, that would be an extraordinary situation. And God does that based on the fittingness of the situation.
I'm just wondering if it's logically possible, right?
Well, again, it's logically possible that God could do that. It's not logically possible that a person.
I mean,
can
without
sin.
God, with our free will.
Oh yeah,
right?
without God, it is impossible because God is the supreme good, as Saint Thomas Aquinas would say. He is the supreme good. Therefore, the common good that every single man seeks after is God, meaning that without God, a person can do a good work, but they can never complete that good work to its fullness because a person who does not have
Well,
God ultimately does not, understand the end of that good work.
comparing a human sin or goodness to God's goodness would be a category error, correct?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Right. So when I say, so you're saying it's impossible for us to not sin, correct?
By
Without
our own
God?
nature, yeah, without God, yeah,
Okay.
it's impossible.
Does God want us to sin?
No, God does not desire us to sin.
That would make God illogical because he wants something that's impossible.
No, Saint Thomas actually does explain this in his in the Summa Theologica. There's active versus permissive will, in the sense that God can want something, in the sense that it is ultimately positive, but still ultimately allow for a certain thing to occur in the sense that providentially it leads to the best outcome. So he uses the comparison of a judge in a courtroom. If a judge has to sentence a person to death, the judge doesn't want to sentence anyone to death, and he has the authority and the power to not sentence a person to death. But there may be a circumstance that arises where the judge, for the sake of the common good, might use his power and use his authority to sentence a person to death. So in that same situation, God desires all people not to sin, but for providential reasons, the best outcome he comes up with could require that he permissively permits a person to sin.
Before before you respond, I just want to say a couple more minutes, and we're going to make sure we get the skeptics involved too, because I don't like it when
No
people sit
doubt.
around
Yeah,
for too long.
that's fair. That's totally fair.
No, I don't mind. So yeah, that seems like a P and not P to me. So God doesn't want people to sin, but yet he permits it.
Yes, that's active will versus permissive will, and that ultimately comes down to his providence.
Yeah, that's interesting. Me personally, I don't. Wanting something that's impossible just doesn't seem like very logical to me. But that's okay. I appreciate your answer. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Now, if you would have said yes, that it is possible, right? If you would have said yes, it is possible for a human to not sin, I would then just ask you, does God know all logical possible worlds? Which he does. And then so
Right.
that means there would be a logical possible world where all humans don't sin. And so then the question would be, why didn't God actualize that world?
Right.
And I actually want to respond to that. Unfortunately, in my understanding of what Christians are taught, most Christians, especially evangelical Protestant Christians, are taught that living perfectly without sin is logically impossible according to a biblical framework. So I think Eastern Thomas is kind of presenting that correctly, in that Orthodox Christian doctrine is that humans cannot basically live perfectly without at least committing error, or actually just living in disobedience at least for a moment. But I guess what did you say about Champ about Oh, logical pot. Why didn't God actualize those realities where everyone does the right thing? Because it's not up to God. That's the whole point of free will.
They
Free
have free
will.
will. They have free will in all logical possible worlds. He's not
Well,
infringing upon free will.
how could so when you say God actualizes a specific world, how could God determine that people do what they do in that world without determining their choices
Think
as
of it.
well?
Think of it this way. Say God wants Jesus crucified in 33. This is actually how you solve the omniscience paradox, because let's say God kicks everything off and knows how everything is going to end from start to finish. You don't have free will in this scenario. The only way that you have free will is if God knows all infinite possible worlds, and there's free will in all of the worlds. So let's say that God has a desire that Jesus is crucified in 33 AD. Well, in one possible world, the Romans will freely choose to do that. In another one, they don't. In another one, he's crucified in 30 AD. And so all God has to do is actualize that possible world to get the goal that he desires without infringing upon free will.
All right, let's do it this way. B.S. Lewis has joined us. I do want to focus on the problem of evil and morality, and we're doing that. But let's see what thoughts. I don't know if Brooklyn Lou and Objective have any thoughts, and let's also see what B.S. Lewis, who has joined us, has to say. I guess it's about what was just discussed. So let's just try to get everyone involved and just make sure everyone's having a chance to contribute something. So Brooklyn Lou, you go first, then Objective. I don't know if you have anything to say. If you don't have anything to say, just you can say move on.
I think I think all of these philosophical ideas about what God is just entirely speculative. So I it doesn't relate to me too much because I'm not that speculative on, you know. So I'm more pure atheist, maybe. I just don't even understand that type of conversation.
So this is more just kind of entertaining dialogue to you. It doesn't have any real
Yes,
bearing on
it really
okay.
seriously is. It's like, well, what would, well, God is this and God is that. And it's like, okay.
Well, I guess, trying to figure out, we're talking about there's evil in the world, and we're trying to figure out if God did exist, what is a logical framework that explains it? And I think that's what we're trying to get to as theists. So, yeah, but I can see how as an atheist, this conversation is kind of boring. But we're gonna
boring. I wanted to say it's not boring. It's very
unrelated.
But it's like I can't even comment because I don't even believe in God. So it's like what am I supposed to say? It's like, okay, I don't believe you can just come up with a bunch of characteristics and properties and then say, well, there's God. I think that whole thing is really strange to me.
Okay. Yeah, that's an honest perspective. Objective, did you have anything that you wanted to say about what's been discussed? I don't. Oh, by the way, someone else.
Go ahead. Let BS Lewis go first, and then I'll go after him.
No, well, there are 7 people in the studio. I just want to say to the person who's back there, I only have my limited account. I can only allow for 6, so you're gonna have to wait for someone to drop off. But so it's Roychess, but we'll have to. Anyways, we have the 6. It's first come, first serve. So Objective X, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'll go before him then. So essentially, the all possible worlds arguments, the cosmological arguments and stuff like this, the whole philosophical approach, it's very interesting to people who are savvy enough to really follow the arguments. However, at the end of the day, these are all presuppositional arguments, and they're frankly just going to fall flat. And it's an interesting engagement if you want to talk philosophy. It certainly can be interesting, but I think to address properly what Brooklyn Lou is talking about and the objection that many atheists have with the problem of evil, you're not going to, as Lou has conveyed, you're not going to be able to reach out across the aisle throwing a lot of, all possible world scenarios out there. So my advice to the theists, if you want to address the atheists seriously, you're basically straw manning the situation. And again, I'm not trying to be disrespectful when I say that, but you're basically addressing it from a position that the atheist is not even engaged in, which is by definition a straw man. So I would ask if you guys are capable of making some type of etymological approach to this that is grounded in something that Lou finds tangible. and maybe try that angle. And if you want to have philosophical debates, I'm more than happy to discuss morality and all these other things with you guys. But I think that Lou was the one who really raised this question in his video, and I think A's wanted to do a direct response. So I would just say that maybe keep that in consideration and try to make it more tangible to something that Lou is relating to, which is his personal experiences. He's looking around the world and he's seeing cancer, he's seeing natural disasters, and try to address those specifically without going into all possible worlds if you can.
Oh yeah, I can solve that. That's easy. Yeah, he's
Well,
basically. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I guess, Champ. Yeah, give a response. And B.S. Lewis, we did say it was going to go to him, so maybe give like a minute response. And
BS
then,
can go. I don't mind. I'll go after.
Okay, yeah. B.S. Lewis, you joined a while ago, so we get to you. So what do you got for us? What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I love the problem of evil, and it's one of the ways I know that your guys' God is false. I'm agnostic to a lot of different gods because there are gods that are posited that I just can't prove one way or another. But the problem of evil for me pretty much convinces me that the Christian God is illogically contradictory. And if you guys don't mind, the Christians on panel, I'll run my version of the problem of evil on you. You guys tell me how you'd answer.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay, so the premise one is he is tri-omni. He possesses omnibenevolence, omniscience, and omnipotence. Do you guys agree with that?
Sure. I mean,
Yes.
I would. Can't speak for everyone.
Okay, it's a pretty easy one. So premise 2 is evil exists, and I define evil as anything that is contrary to God's nature or will, as described in premise 1, his omnibenevolent nature.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah, Champ 2, A's, everybody?
I'm not a Christian. My God is different than the other
okay.
guys. No, I'll tell you how I solve it. Don't worry. Go ahead.
Dirty Varmint is also disagreeing with the omni property God. So that's kind of interesting that we have theists who are not even in agreement on what the properties.
No,
of
I
God
agree
are.
with the omni properties. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what is the premise that Dirty Varmint doesn't like? Is what I'm wondering. I guess.
The omni one's premise 1. So
Okay, yeah. So I guess Dirty Varmint doesn't agree on the omni property God, but I guess the people on the panel do. So let's just roll with it for now.
All right.
Oh, okay. So premise 3 is that before creation of anything, that's the earth, angels, spiritual beings, whatever, in a reality of God alone, evil didn't exist.
Okay. Let's just go with it.
Yeah, because it trails back to premise 1, his omnibenevolent nature, and if he's the only thing that exists, then there's nothing but good.
Okay. All right.
And so now you guys are in a trilemma. So there's 3 different ways to get out of this, is to reject one of the 3 different premises. You have to reject that evil exists. You have to reject that some evil was there before creation with God, or you have to reject one of the omnis.
Let me ask
Do you
a
want to answer
question.
this?
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
just want to clarify. Like, once God basically created things, though, like that opens the possibility that evil things might arise, right? I mean, am I missing something there?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, God knew evil would occur. Same with natural disasters, all these things. Yep.
Yeah, so then it's not against his will or nature, because he knew and wanted it to happen, or else he wouldn't have created it that way.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
So the evil doesn't exist. You guys reject evil then?
No, evil exists.
I would say
Evil
this.
is just.
Yeah, I would say God created a world. God is the being that created the world in such a way as God wanted. And
no, remember the definition of evil. It's anything contrary to his omnibenevolent nature.
Right. Yeah.
right. So the evil, in my opinion, the evil doesn't stem from God. It stems from other entities who are not God acting in evil ways.
Evil occurs because we're currently separated from God. Right.
Yeah. He knew that would be a result of creating those creatures, right?
He did. Yeah.
So yeah, he wanted the evil to happen because he wanted the creatures.
I wouldn't say that.
He has a reason for it, though.
I would say this.
No,
I
he
would
doesn't.
say that.
I'll show you. Don't worry.
And again, Brooklyn Lou, I believe I've had this conversation with Brooklyn Lou in perhaps I think that free will does solve this problem. I don't see it as a problem from my belief, because for God to create truly free beings, God can't restrict the choices they make or determine the choices they make. So God has decided that if he wants to create other entities within his universe, creatures, and for them to have free will, which God has prioritized over them not having free will, then evil will arise as a result of that. So I just don't see why it either.
So
Well, let me finish. It doesn't invalidate any of the omni properties for God, and it seems like it's a plausible thing that God might do based on what God wants to do. So that's my opinion.
yeah, you're saying he wants free will, but he knows that evil is a consequence or a result of free will. So he wants evil, and if he can't create free will without evil, then he's not omnipotent.
You ever heard the maximally great world argument posed by Graham Oppie?
This is why I used omni and not maximally great.
You ever heard that argument before?
Yeah, but maximally great's really fuzzy.
Well, here's what I would say, and this is kind of to expand on A's point a little bit in regards to the problem of evil and his response to it. So the dignity of a person is ultimately rendered according to their natural end. And so God has created a person with rational faculties to participate in the supreme good freely. Now, God can, if he chose to, he could override that if he wanted to. But again, God wouldn't do that because it's contrary. That would ultimately be contrary to the dignity of men, since the natural end of men is ultimately to freely participate in the supreme good according to their rational faculties, and thus overriding it would be contrary to that dignity. So in that regard, that because people have that rational faculty either to participate in the supreme good, which is God, or to participate in, temporal goods, as G.K. Chesterton would talk about. Because of that, that's ultimately the dignity of man. And so God freely chooses not to supersede that dignity. So I think it makes perfect sense in that regards.
Where do you well, let me ask one question that sums up my whole argument. Can an omnipotent being create anything that's against his nature?
No, he can't. Well, he can.
So.
No, God's bound by logic.
Right.
Or he's bound by his nature. Like when you talk about free will, you'll say, "Oh, you can't just choose to fly because it's not in your nature to fly," right?
Yeah.
So
Because he's logical,
if
he
he's
doesn't
all
go against
good,
his nature.
if he's all good, he can't create anything that's against all good.
Well, two things I would say in that regard. First of all, sin and evil is, as Aristotle would talk about, a result of the privation of good. And this is one of the things that St. Thomas talks about in the 5 Ways, is he talks about gradations of being, which is the idea that everything is created with a maximum. And ultimately, when something doesn't reach that maximum, it's not because they're participating in the good as God created. It's because they are, deprived of that good in some manner. But in regards to your question, can God create something in his existence that is possibly distinct from him? The answer is yes. I mean, the analogy that's often used is the analogy of an artist that paints a painting. The painting isn't the artist himself, but the painting can still in some ways resemble the image and the idea that the artist is going for.
Well, what I'd say is, in the artist example, whatever comes out on that canvas is still from the mind of that artist. And so if you're saying an all good being has evil in his mind that comes out onto his canvas, you're saying that, he's not all good.
Well,
like
Can I solve
a child can't come up with some of the graphic violence and sexual scenes that we see as adults because they just don't have it in their brains. They're so innocent and good that they don't have the capacity to put that on a canvas.
Can I solve the problem of evil really quick? It won't take long.
Okay,
let's go to Champ.
Okay,
Yeah,
which
sure. So
which premise?
no, I agree with all your premises. God knew evil would occur, but he knew evil would occur for the greater good, right? I'll explain it. So if God has the property of omnibenevolence, that means that God is maximally good. If God is maximally good, that means that in the end he will maximize the good for all beings. So I hold to the view that all beings will return to the presence of God in the end, and that God actually must allow bad things temporarily for the greater good virtues to come about. Things such as perseverance, courage, hope, compassion, forgiveness, these types of things. So if God puts everyone in heaven off the start, you can't have these greater virtues. God values these greater virtues. So in our temporary suffering, God is creating the maximally best possibility, because in the end, we all go to heaven, and we also get to have these greater virtues temporarily.
Can I jump in with the defense of the greater goods?
Yeah, sure.
The greater good argument doesn't work, because in doing so, by creating the opportunity for greater goods, he also creates the opportunity for greater evils. If he creates violence so that somebody could be brave, he's also invented cowardice, and so they all cancel each other out.
These virtues.
There's another problem here. There's another problem I may interject with this cosmological argument and this maximally great argument that we're actually focusing on right now, is that the argument is circular, for one thing, and so it doesn't hold up logically. It's not a deductive argument, therefore you're not coming up with a sound conclusion. And so and plus it's completely subjective. Your maximally great properties are just whatever you decide to make them to be.
If
and
God
the
is a
final
maximally
defeater
great being, he's necessary,
but
right?
maximally great doesn't mean anything.
Agreed.
That doesn't actually mean anything.
It means there's nothing greater. It means there's nothing greater, right?
Great by whose standard?
But exactly. And the other problem is that all you have to do is just say, well, there's a maximally great God-eating pink unicorn that eats your God by necessity.
Great by logic, right?
But you haven't introduced logic. You haven't introduced logic. You've introduced a circular argument, so therefore it cannot be logical.
Yeah,
God is necessary.
show how it's circular.
It's situational, like being.
It's not
big.
circular.
Yeah,
I'm not using a conclusion as a premise.
No, I said subjective.
If God is a maximally great being, then God must exist. However, that's circular, because the existence of God is a premise that requires further
logic. That's just modal logic.
No, that's circular.
It's still circular, though.
If God is maximally great, that he would have the property of necessity, correct?
Which makes it circular because you don't have the proof of that. You're asserting that. So now you're defining it into existence, which is another logical fallacy. It's a definitional fallacy.
No, in order to be maximally great, you would have to have the property of necessity. Otherwise, you're lacking, right? If you don't have the property of necessity, you're lacking, correct?
No, prove it.
Yeah. So if you don't have the property of necessity, how are you not lacking?
So the properties.
Same thing. Let's say God is 99% omnibenevolent. That's not a maximally great being either.
The properties thing is like sometimes it's situational. So sometimes being really big would be the maximally greatest thing for a situation. But sometimes
can you think of a greater being that I've described?
I was in the middle of a sentence. Something really small could be also maximally great for another situation.
Yeah, name a greater being that I've described. Omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient, omnibenevolent, and necessary.
Your God plus one.
My God plus one. So like two of them, right?
No, plus
one. No, just your maximally great qualities plus one.
Yeah,
a little bit.
Such as the God-eating unicorn. The God-eating unicorn is now the plus one, and it must eat your God in order to exist.
This isn't
that's
an
what
argument.
makes it maximally great.
This isn't an argument.
So part of the maximally great being that he's saying is one that eats your maximally great God.
Yeah, my God.
It's maximally great to be the eater rather than be.
Yeah, the God I described is omnipotent. How's it going to do that?
Because he's also omnipotent.
And it can't, and yours can't be omnipotent because it cannot create a world without evil.
To my God. So he's equal to my God.
It can't be omnipotent because it has to create evil. by your
But
definition. He
he
has no
also
choice.
has the description
No,
of
that's not
eating
true.
your God. He eats your God. That's in his
No,
description.
good. No, God must be good in order to allow coherence to exist. If God is evil, there's no coherence. It's just chaos.
Those
Let
are
me
all
ask-
just assumptions.
Let me ask you this. From our perspective, we use language terms, evil, this or that. I mean, ultimately, we can't, these are from our perspective. From God's perspective, people having the choice to use free will. I mean, why can't, just basically what I'm trying to say is why can't God be like, this, how do we prove that God doesn't know that people having free will isn't ultimately better than people not having free will and thus not having the right to commit evil acts? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
Well, I think free will has to be demonstrated because, just because I go pick Cheerios off the top of the refrigerator instead of what do I have, Raisin Bran over there every morning, I think I have free will. But the fact of the matter is that trillions of things had to come into play before I was even in front of my refrigerator that I had no control over. And there comes a point to where nobody had control over those choices and those choices and those choices. I mean, it's odd statistics that I was even born. There's so many sperms, so many eggs, so many different DNA codes that could have come into play. My father could have never met my mother. I mean, there's just so many statistics that came into play that I personally had no will over. So defining free will becomes a very tricky thing.
well, okay, there's proving that free will exists, and then there's kind of going by our experience. And I don't think, is there anyone who's going to, do you want to deny that it seems like our choices are being made by us and that they have an impact on what happens?
So
Like,
for me personally, I think there's actually,
let me put it this way.
I think there's, okay.
I think free will should be the default position unless the materialist or the skeptic proves otherwise. Let me put it that way. So how am I wrong?
I'll grant you free will. I'll grant you free
Okay.
will, and because of my my three premises I gave you, if your God can't make a creation that does gets everything he wants out of his creation without evil, he's not omnipotent.
Let me go at it this way then. Can God create a universe, either the one we have or any universe, where 2 + 2 = 5?
He can do
In your
whatever he
mind.
wants.
Well, how? So here's the thing. People say God can do whatever they want, but he actually can't. So there are logical principles, nature of God that he can't violate. So God
Yeah, but
can't stop me.
just because we have free will doesn't mean that we don't have to be born with super suits
Yeah.
that keep us from, we could be born without disease. That has nothing to do with free will. Free will is based off of the structure that we're operating in, and that structure is created by God. So God could create a universe that has no murder, no SA, none of these terrible, no earthquakes, all these other things that Lou was talking about, and we could still have free will to choose or not choose God.
You're suggesting that free will is logically dependent on evil, which I need you to
No,
draw that conclusion.
I do believe free will means having the ability to choose the full range of options in a given moment, which would include all those horrible things you mentioned. So
he cannot give those options.
Okay, so let's just choose the example of hitting someone for no reason, hurting them. You have let's just say a universe with 2 people in it. If they both have free will, one person can choose to move his arm in such a way as to strike the other person. How would God remove that ability to choose that without restricting that person's free will? How would that work?
So it'd be part of your nature. So whenever somebody goes to hit somebody else, they instantly fall asleep. It's part of their biology. It's built into their biology that they can't really hit another person, because as soon as the fist gets like half a foot away from the face, they just go out like a narcoleptic.
The start and stopping point for free will can be as simple as choosing or not choosing to recognize God or to follow God. It has absolutely no necessity in being able to hit people or step on bugs or anything you can possibly imagine. None of that has to be relevant. You can have your free will and it just be a choice about whether or not to serve your God or to recognize your God, or however you guys define it these days. But it doesn't have to include earthquakes. It doesn't have to include punching people. It doesn't have to include any of those things. You're literally defining all those things, which is the problem of these types of arguments, is you're trying to subjectively decide
Justify
what
them.
needs to be right. Exactly. And you could go on forever with your own justifications, and somebody else is going to come along and say, no, we can do it this way. And somebody else is going to come along and say, we could do it that way.
Will you just use your God's all-powerfulness against you in these situations?
Let me put it this way. As someone who is familiar with, I mean, everyone is to a certain extent, but engineering principles, there are what are called design constraints, that if you design something a certain way, it eliminates your ability to design it another way. So you have to figure out the trade-offs of of a car, a structure, a roadway, a bridge. If you design it one way, it means that you eliminate certain other possibilities of designing another way. So I think that when it comes to these problems, because humans have no idea how to put a universe together, we're looking at what are actually universal logical design constraints that appear to us. Well, why can't God create a universe with no natural disasters? Well, then you have to suspend the laws of physics. So what do you want? Laws of physics or a universe that is just chaotic but doesn't have any?
You don't know that you have to suspend the laws of physics because you don't know that. You have no evidence of that. The other thing is, as you know, I am a designer. I've got patents. I know exactly what I'm talking about when I design. You are straw manning the conversation by trying to say, it's like the watchmaker argument. We know how things are designed. We know there are limitations based off of the materials or the mediums or all these various resources that we have at our hands. We are now stepping into this. We have the whole playing field in front of us with no restrictions because we are omni. So this argument isn't even relatable. It's a complete straw man.
We have simulations of the cosmological constants. We know what would occur if it was different.
And he could make life thrive in any cosmological constant.
No, he can't. Not if he operates in logic.
Could he make a person live and thrive?
I already told you, God's omnipotence operates in logic. I already told you that.
Yeah, could he make a person live on the sun?
Yeah, God can't do illogical things. What don't you understand?
Yeah, I would say the answer is no as well. There are. I go back to the very simple example of 2 + 2 = 5. There's no universe or reality as far as I can conceive where 2 + 2 = 5, and thus God can't do that. Similarly, when it comes to designing a universe with the laws of physics, perhaps we're just seeing the limitations of design constraints at a universal level. I mean, you have to take that into consideration at least.
If God snapped his fingers and just renamed 4 5 tomorrow, then 2 + 2 = 5.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you can't put two objects together and get 5 in any universe. No.
But we would all call it 5, wouldn't we?
Yes.
And outside of a human brain, 2 + 2 = anything is worthless.
Let me say something before I go.
Yeah, Brooklyn Lou. Let's get Brooklyn Lou. He's been very patient.
And I just want to get this out, and then I'll listen because I have something to do, but I want to keep it on so I can hear answers. All right. Yes, you can make 2 + 2 = 5 if you just change the meaning of these words linguistically. You know, but I know that's not what you mean. You can't make 2 objects + 2 objects = 5, but you can change the words. The other thing is, B.S. Lewis said something brilliant that I had not heard. Okay, and that he was talking about God conceiving of evil, and if you can conceive of evil, what kind of evil? I want to say that Jesus even said as such. Right? In the Bible, Jesus said that what you think of, you're guilty of. So God conceives of a lot of evil. So is he guilty of evil? The last two things that I want to say: does God have free will? And the last thing is, if free will is, everything, and it means so much, when we go to heaven, do we have free will, or can we do bad in heaven? So with that, I'm going to leave, but I'm going to listen to your answers.
Yeah, before you leave, Brooklyn Lou, I just want to say thank you very much for joining the panel. I appreciate your comments and your insights, and you're welcome again. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Ace. Have a good one.
So let's do this. I know Eastern Thomas was looking to jump in, so let's go to him, and then we'll move around from there. Go ahead, Eastern Thomas.
Right. So in regards to the 2 + 2 = 5 argument, does this mean? The answer is no. God can't make 2 + 2 = 5. So does that mean that he's not perfect? No, and on the contrary, it shows he is perfect, because if there were logical contradictions found in God, then that would constitute some sort of deficiency in his perfection. Rather, the fact that he is, consistently ordered is a testament to his perfection in that regard. But to answer Lou's question, he was asking, does God have free will? Yes, God does have free will. God is inclined by his nature to do certain things. Again, God's essence is his existence, and God, being charity and being love itself, desires that all men share in his goodness, not by coercion, but rather by participation. And again, participation, in order for a person to participate in the supreme good, they have to have the rational faculties to either participate in his goodness or not participate in his goodness. Now, in regards to, well, how could he create something that, is contrary to his goodness? The fact of the matter is, he creates things with a maximum cause. The problem of evil, or the lack of something that is good, is ultimately a deprivation of the perfection in its object, according to the misusage of a person's rational appetite. And then he also asked another question. He said, in heaven, will we have free will? And the answer is yes. Again, a person, goes to heaven when they're unmeritoriously offered grace, but freely choose to accept that grace after it's been offered to them. God does this by making the grace appealing. So imagine you loved pizza and you walked by a pizza shop and you smelled this pizza and you thought it was amazing. And you said, oh, it's really hard to resist the amazing smell of this pizza. I really want to go in and eat some. Ultimately, if you do go in, even if it is because of how irresistible it is, it's still because of your free will. It wasn't like you became a slave to your senses, but it's ultimately that smell that draws you to the pizza. And in the same regard, God makes grace, or the reception of grace, more attractive to whom he elects. And so in heaven, we'll be so close to God, and we'll have so much knowledge of God, that grace, yes, we'll have the ability to reject it, but because our intellects will be rightly ordered through the intellectual virtues, as Aristotle talks about, and B, because the grace will be so good, it would be, rationally very hard for a person to resist. Because of those two things, we wouldn't want to reject that grace or rebel against God, because of how good and how pleasing and how obvious it will be to the person in heaven.
I would probably ask, why did Lucifer and 300 angels reject him then?
I would just like to point out that so far, B.S. Lewis has come up with a very, very sound syllogism. It's deductive and it leads to a sound conclusion. The arguments, the cosmological argument, it's not getting around that because of what I mentioned with this God-eating unicorn. And you can come back and the only response that you have is to say, well, that your God eats God-eating unicorns. And so I get a +1, you have a +2, then I give a
you can't have
+3.
two necessary beings. That's the problem with your argument.
Exactly. It isn't a problem because it literally
Yes, it is. It's illogical.
It literally eats, but you're asserting that your argument is maximally great, and I'm giving my
You're just
being
asserting
a
your argument is logical
quality.
when it's not.
Well, champ, let me give you an instance where you need two necessary beings.
You can only have one.
You assert that, but I'm going to give you an example of where you can have two. So, objective ethics God is a necessary being that eats other necessary beings. Therefore, your God is necessary because
that's a circular
it
argument.
needs to be eaten by his God.
Yeah, good job. Oh yeah, do you
Yeah, but
have
you're
free
using
will
a
in
circular.
heaven?
You're using a circular argument as
I'm
well
not.
because your conclusion is
Yeah.
baked into your premise. If your being is necessary, then it must exist, and that's the entire conclusion you're trying to come to. So
Yeah, do you know what
it's called
modal
it's
logic
called
is? That's how modal logic
it's called
operates.
question begging. It's a
Do you know
circular
what
argument.
do you know what modal logic is?
Do you know the difference between a nomonologically illogical
Yeah,
thing
that's a
and a
two quote
logical?
fallacy. I asked the question
No, because
first.
you're suggesting nomonological impossibilities when you think you're talking about logical impossibilities.
Yeah, so you actually do have free will in heaven because once you experience God's love, you won't feel the need to sin anymore. That's an easy question to answer.
Well, it doesn't mean it's a right answer, right? You can answer easy all day
Where's the
long
contradiction? Where's the contradiction?
because
Let's,
evil is necessary or free will on Earth, right?
No, it isn't.
Okay, then why did he create Earth?
It's necessary for the greater virtues. I told you that earlier, remember?
And I told you it leads to greater vices.
Yeah, it also leads to greater virtues, yeah. You can't have
Yes.
virtues without bad things, can you?
So they kind of cancel each other out and leave us with the
Also,
original evil.
if you spend eternity in heaven, what difference does it make if you experience temporary pain and suffering?
I don't know, because it will be
Right,
a,
there you go.
a
Problem
scar.
solved. Problem solved.
It'll be a scar on your psyche.
No, it won't, because you'll be in bliss in the end.
Okay, so we know a lot about childhood trauma and how it shapes somebody moving forward, their whole personality. If you're telling me that,
Yeah, God's love will wipe all that away. That's how great it is, correct.
you're just hand waving stuff away by making stuff up on the spot.
Okay, where's
All
the
right.
contradiction?
I want to say there's someone in the back, Catholic Light Apologetics. You will have to wait until someone drops. But I'm interested in hearing what you had to say. Sorry to interrupt y'all's conversation. I just wanted to make sure that other people were. I had to do it. Maybe I should have just kept my mouth shut. But we all reaching a resolution, or do y'all want to keep going with that? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, I still haven't heard anybody's which premise they want to mine to drop. If they want to drop the evil existing, that evil was around before God created, or if God drops one of his omnis.
Let's
Wait, what's your conclusion? It might be a non sequitur. What's your conclusion?
It's not that. It's a trilemma. There's no conclusion. The conclusion is depending. It's a logical inconsistency to hold all three at the same time, and so the conclusion depends on which ones you drop.
All right, let me try it this way. First of all, Roychess has joined us. So let's get him a word, and then I will try to give a response. Roychess, what do you have to say about this?
Yeah, thank you for allowing me on. Just listening to some of the things is there's so many things I could address. It's crazy. So the premises that he offered were not deductive, right? So those were inductive. That's why there's also no conclusion. And even if you did have one, you could have all three of those premises that can be true and still have a false conclusion. So I don't think there's a necessary conclusion that you can reach there. As far as the modal logic argument goes, that cannot lead to certainty. So that's where that goes wrong.
Could you explain my premises and how you can come to a conclusion that doesn't fit those three? Because I'm always tightening this argument up just to get it as tight as I can. So any valid critique is welcome.
Well, so the problem with modal logic, it is not a fully deductive system, which means that you can have more than one correct answer, right? So that means if you have three answers, three possible solutions, that can't be certainty. If I have three possible answers, certainty relies one answer and only one answer. The most possibilities you can have is two, and then you eliminate one of the two. That is why deductive logic works. Right? So modal logic is like a semi-deductive logic, like math and computer science, that you need more than just deductive principles. You have to add to it.
Well, let me ask you the premises then, and because I want a specific example. So premise one, God is tri-omni. Agree or disagree?
Tri-omni, what do you mean by that? Like, so I understand.
Omnibenevolent, omniscient, and omnipotent.
Okay, yes, I agree with that.
Okay, 2, evil exists, and evil is defined by premise 1, his omnibenevolent nature. It's anything contrary to that.
I don't know if I would agree. That one is kind of shaky to me, but let's say I agree with it to see where we go. All right, let's say I agree with it.
The 3rd premise is in a universe or reality of God alone. Before creation, evil didn't exist.
Yes, I would agree.
Yeah,
Yes,
by
I would agree.
definition.
Yes.
Okay, so you're having a problem with my definition of evil. Why is that?
No, not the definition of evil. The second premise.
Yeah, evil exists. You believe evil exists, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Which premise did I say that I said was shaky? I'm sorry. I thought it was the second one.
Yeah, that's evil exists. And I define evil as being contrary to God's omnibenevolent nature. Anything against his nature.
So
he's the moral. He's the state.
Omnibenevolent is what I have an issue with.
You already agreed to that in premise 1.
No, omnibenevolence was not in premise 1. You said all knowing, all present, and all powerful.
No, omnibenevolent is in premise 1. The tri-omnis, omnipowerful,
Yeah,
omnibenevolent. I didn't say present. Did I say present? If I did, I didn't mean to.
No, I thought you did. So I didn't. So I would disagree with the omnibenevolence. I don't agree with that.
You don't think God is all good all the time?
No.
Okay.
There's nothing that requires that.
That doesn't apply because people use him as the moral standard for the objective moral argument, and so he has to be all good according to the moral argument for God.
No. So when you say objective morals, there's two contexts generally with that. One is that the deity of God makes it moral, but the field in philosophy that covers morals does not deal with that, right? Deontology, if you look it up, does not deal with God at all. There's no divine argument there. Deontology describes morality without a God. And
this
you can have objective morality without a God.
I know, and this is an internal critique against the God I mentioned in there. So it doesn't apply to philosophy in general. So if you don't believe in that God, then this argument doesn't apply to you.
Oh, okay. So you would have to change it then, I guess. So to fit.
No, I only use it to disprove the God of Christianity.
Yeah, but you can't disprove it if the Christian doesn't believe he's always good. So that would be a hiccup.
That Christian's a very odd Christian then, because I haven't really heard many that don't say he's the standard for morality, for moral goodness.
No, so that Christian is talking about the divine argument, right? So morals can exist without God. So that Christian is not fully aware of what morals are.
I don't hear many of those types of Christians.
Let's hold on. Let's try to move it around the room. Let's go. I kicked Eastern. I'll bring him right back, but I just wanted to kind of regulate things. Catholic Light Apologetics has joined us, so let's give Catholic Light a little chance to say something, and then kind of go around the room, give Champ and Objective another chance. Let's just try to share the time a little bit. All right, we good? All right, cool.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really have too much to say. I was just aware that this stream was happening, and I just clicked on because I think these are cool streams, like the small channel streams. Everybody talks to each other and stuff. So I'm not even fully aware of what's being talked about. I'm picking up its problem of evil stuff, but yeah, I haven't really gleaned enough about what's being talked about to add anything, I suppose.
Do you object to anything, like specifically about Christianity?
Well, I'm Catholic, as my name suggests, so I don't object to Christianity.
Okay.
Let me. I don't want to like just press the one atheist guy here, but let me put the argument to me as you were saying it. Help me understand.
There's two atheist guys here.
Oh, who are they?
Well, technically, I'm actually an agnostic. I'm a full agnostic. I don't say there is God. I don't say there's no God. I just deal with the arguments as they come. But as far as whether there's a God or not, I give it a 50-50.
Okay, so you've got objective ethics is an agnostic, and then B.S. Lewis is and I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he's an atheist.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's I guess B.S. Lewis's argument is the topic of conversation right now. What's he saying?
I'll make it quick because I've been monopolizing the time. So premise 1, God is tri-omni, omnibenevolent, omnipotent, and omniscient. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Premise 2, evil exists. Evil is defined as whatever is contrary to God's omnibenevolent nature. Do you agree with that?
Somewhat. Generally speaking, I think most Catholic speakers think of evil as an absence of good. So there might be a little bit of semantics there, but I think the short answer is yes. I agree.
Yeah, even if it exists conceptually, it still exists. So, premise 3 is before creation of anything in a realm of God alone, evil didn't exist. Do you agree?
Before creation of anything,
yeah,
evil did not exist.
Angels, spiritual beings, earth, people, whatever. Yeah, just God and the Trinity.
I would actually reject that. God is eternally willing the universe into existence. There is no before for God. That's a category error.
No, he's talking about other things existing, not just God. He's saying only God exists in the universe that he's talking about.
I know.
The
he said before. He has the word before in his premise. That's a category error.
No, he's not saying before God. He's saying before everything else.
What's his premise 3 again? Name premise 3 again?
Before the creation, the actualization of before.
See the word before? That's a category error.
Okay, creation. Creation is an event. Creation's an event.
Creation.
There's no before.
Yes,
you're speaking there. Before only exists in time. God is outside of time. This is a category.
No, but he's not talking about God. He's talking about something different from God. What's
so
God created, right? God is the one who created.
Yes.
So he is talking about God. Yeah, it's
no, he's not. No,
is the universe as eternal as God is?
No. Yeah, the universe is a temporal effect that comes from God's eternal will. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but he's saying before the universe.
Like from the universe's perspective, I suppose.
Yeah, there is no. What's the first verse of the Bible? In the beginning, God created.
I don't believe in the Bible. They do. That's their problem.
Well, what? Okay. This argument doesn't apply to you then.
Yeah, let them deal with it. Go ahead. I'm just telling you how it's wrong. They can actually still mail me and use my argument there because their God kind of operates similar to mine.
They're not.
Well, his argument might be valid if his argument only works against biblical theists, then
it doesn't. Your God is eternal too. There is no before for your God either.
Creation's not eternal.
It is. God is eternally willing the universe into existence, and it causes a temporal effect. Well, then they would be very mistaken, and they would get cooked by you.
Yes, they would. No, do you agree with that, Catholic Light? Before creation, evil didn't exist.
I think the short answer is yes. But I could see playing with semantics there, leading to an issue.
So this is a trilemma argument. It's logically inconsistent amongst the 3 different yeses that you gave. So you have to drop one of them. That'll determine what your conclusion is.
What I don't understand what the dilemma is. The premises were that there's a tri-omni God.
Yeah, before creation in a world of an omnibenevolent God alone, there was no evil. He created evil entered the world, and that evil is what is contrary to his omnibenevolent nature.
Yeah, but that would mean there's no benevolence if he created evil, right?
You should just say in the beginning is anthropomorphic. By the way, Catholic, you should just say that.
So he won't be omnibenevolent because there is no what does darkness have to do with light, as Paul does? Like there is no drop of yeast or in the leaven that is God of omnibenevolence.
So that would surmise that there was no potency for evil before the existence of the world, which again, us granting that the universe didn't exist, therefore within that order of created being, there wasn't a deprivation of good, doesn't surmise that there wasn't the potency for that to exist previously.
Yeah, it goes against his omnibenevolent nature.
No, I don't think
that's the assumption. That's the problem. You can't prove that assumption. That's where the argument fails.
Why can't I prove that? Because all good means all good. It means no evil, right?
No, but who said he's all good? He says he creates evil in the book.
I know, but they say he's
evil.
I know this is your hang up on it because I didn't say omnipresent, but Catholic Light, I did say omnibenevolent. He did agree to that. It's the standard for the moral argument for God. Whenever anybody gives the moral argument for God, he is the standard because he is all goodness.
Yeah, but that's definitely wrong.
Well, then
I see your point. I see your point because the book does say God himself says, I create evil. Right. So
yeah,
that clearly
they'll just find words around that. They'll say calamity or whatever. They'll try to get out of evil.
That's definitely inconsistent. You're right about that. So yeah, he's not omnibenevolent. He tells himself that he creates evil.
Thoughts, Catholic Light?
So you're saying it is the I'm still not fully, is the argument basically that, like, I don't know, I suppose evil came into being, but everything is subject to an omnibenevolent God's will. So is that not a contradiction?
Yeah. So the easier question to ask would be, can an omnipotent, an all-powerful being do anything that is against his omnibenevolent, all-good nature?
No.
Right. So he couldn't create evil then because it's not in his nature.
All he has to say is he created them good, and when they sinned, they became evil.
Yeah,
that's all he has to say.
Even that's where the all-knowingness comes in, because he knows that's a consequence of that. So he still knows that evil is going to be created, even if it's one step out.
I think where I would go with this is that everything that exists to bring about a greater good. So in that sense,
we covered this one.
That's actually terrible, because then there's no evil. If he brings about a greater good, that means there is no evil. That means that evil should occur for the greater good. You don't want to say that.
I mean, that's...
Well, I wouldn't agree with that argument from Champ, because the argument that many of the philosophers like St. Thomas and St. Augustine make are ultimately that God's view of creation, or his plan of creation, is that God, being charity, freely allows his creation to continue to exist in that goodness and that charity that is him, not through coercion but through participation. And God would say the fact that a person is created independent of God with the rational appetite to either choose the supreme good, which is God, as their ultimate end, or to denote their rational faculties towards temporal things. The fact that God allows humans to do that and creates humans to do that ultimately is the dignity of his creation. That is ultimately the dignity behind his creation, and that's ultimately what makes God so charitable, is that he creates man distinct from God, but with the ability to freely participate in his goodness.
Yes, that's true. However, he also would know those things, right? So my thing would be...
my point, I think the point that I was trying to make is God's view is that is the highest good. It is the highest good that a person should have the rational faculties to participate in his goodness freely, or not participate in his goodness freely. And I think in God's mind, from a providential standpoint, he views that as a higher good than just, providentially creating everyone so that their minds are just coerced to goodness like robots.
Okay, so are you talking about the domain of Earth, or are you just talking about in general? Because that sounds like you're talking about only the Earth.
I'm talking about the participation in the supreme good, which is God according to his creation.
Yeah, but where do they do that? Because I'm asking you the location. Where are they doing that?
Well, they do it so long as they exist. I mean, they do it
where are they existing?
Well, they're existing on Earth and in heaven.
So in heaven, you need a free will?
Yes.
Why?
Well, in because God created man in the sense that their dignity was that they could freely participate in the supreme good. And that principle doesn't end when a person goes to heaven.
It does. If you don't have a human body in heaven, Why do you need those things?
Because the soul is subsistent, and unlike the body, the soul is subsistent in and of itself.
Yeah, but why would a soul need that? Because what it sounds like to me is that you're opening up the soul for making a bad decision again.
Well, the soul needs that because the soul and the body are compository matter.
Yeah, but if you leave it up to me, if I'm in heaven and I can still make a bad choice and start the whole cycle over, is that what's going to happen again?
Well, a person doesn't do that because the only people who are in heaven are those who have rightly ordered their intellects and their passions. That's ultimately why a person who's in heaven does not do that. But in terms of could a person, could a person hypothetically rebel against God in heaven? Yes, a person could hypothetically rebel against God in heaven. But the reason that doesn't happen is because God, in his providence, knows who is going to rightly order their passions and who isn't. And so he elects those people to be saved. And those people, when they're in heaven, because they've rightly ordered their intellect and they've rightly ordered their passions, by their own free will, they choose to completely participate in God's goodness. And again, because they've been freed from sin and God's justice has been repudiated to them, they're no longer distracted by corporeal things.
So you're saying it's possible, but because it sounds like it's discriminatory. It sounds like God is not going to choose people who are going to have that possibility.
What I'm saying is it's hypothetically possible that a person could do that. God chooses to give his elect the sufficient grace ultimately to participate in his supreme good, to the point where when they get to heaven, God's grace becomes so tantalizing and so irresistible, not in the sense that that they don't have the free will to reject it, but in the sense that his grace is so appetizing to the senses that no rational person would want to reject that.
All right, I gotta interrupt for a second because we're getting close to the time we have to stop. I want to do a hard pivot. Objective ethics, are you here?
Yes, brother, I am.
Objective ethics, this is actually related to, I'm sorry to just interrupt people, but I do want to make sure the conversation is, we're getting multiple ideas and viewpoints on the table. He has an argument about the objectivity of morality absent theism, or I don't know if he would phrase it that way. I kind of want to, it's kind of the same topic. Does anyone kind of want to run by that? Do you want to do that, objective ethics, see what the theists, how they deal with your argument?
Yeah, this is all these gentlemen are very intelligent. I'd love to get the feedback on it. Now I have to admit that I have reworked my syllogism and I don't have the final version, but I can give enough of it to where I think I can get the idea out there.
Yeah, I think we have Eastern Thomas, Catholic Light, Roychess. They're all theists. So let's. How about you kind of interact with that, and then we'll go with that for a little bit, and then we'll have to. We won't. Obviously, we're not going to be able to solve the problem of morality tonight in the time we have left. But let's try to at least kind of address it, and that way we can have done that, and then we'll move forward. All right. So let's go forward with that.
Yeah, I'd appreciate any feedback you guys have. I'm open to criticism, very much like what B.S. Lewis says, and I'm really trying to just hammer down these premises and whatnot. And again, I don't have it written in front of me, all the premises, so I'm kind of just shooting from the hip here. But the idea is that, first of all, I'm focusing on the difference between ethics and morality, and I'm looking at ethics as being the meta, the objective standard, and then morality as being the normative way that we behave in our own subjective way. So we are subjectively dealing with an objective truth, which gets me to an ought-is problem at the end of the day, which I believe I can defeat by the premise that it is better to be alive than dead, because the dead cannot honor the dead, nor can they offer any further assistance to the living. So if we could accept that as a premise, then that should defeat my is-ought dilemma, get me past the guillotine, I'm hoping. So the idea is that the ethics are tied to evolution, and that ethics are the link between biological evolution and social evolution. Morality is tied to well-being, and well-being is basically ultimate well-being is essentially realized by virtue, which I'm defining virtue in this as being that perfect medium between having too much or too little. And this gets me ultimately to objective morality or objective ethics being true.
Okay, so how do you define objective? What are you defining objective? Are you using
Anything that is
standard?
based, oh, I'm sorry. Anything that is based in the natural world that we observe in the natural world is objectively true.
So even if people disagree?
Correct. So I cannot disagree that 2 + 2 = 4. It's objectively true.
Okay, so I'm glad you said that. So some things are universally true, correct? When you say 2 + 2 = 4, that applies everywhere on Earth. Yes?
Correct. But
So
but
it's
there are
universal.
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's a universal property, what I'm trying to bring forth, right? It's not a subjective thing.
Yes, but ethics and morality only apply to humanity. I have not been able to tie it to animals and plants, although I do tie it to evolution. So I'm trying to figure out how this all ties together, because I do believe it does actually. The ethical the behavior, what was I talking about? The virtue, that too little, too much, too little, the balance there does tie into evolution from a biological standpoint, which is what gets me to the objective standard. And that needs to function in order for all species to optimally survive, as many as possible. Anyway, we have to work within the environment. We have to work within the group. So another premise that I haven't laid out yet is that we are a social species. And so as individuals, it's every individual's responsibility to work to the benefit of the group.
Right, but you do understand ethics and morality are not the same thing. They're two different things.
That's correct. Ethics is the meta standard, the objective standard, and morality is the way that we interact subjectively with the objective standard. So the objective thing is the ethics. So murder is objectively wrong.
Wait a minute. I think you have it backwards. Morality would be above ethics.
I believe that ethics are normative. I'm sorry, that morality is normative. Ethics is meta.
When you say meta, you're talking about just the language? Like a meta language?
Concept or principle.
So, for example, we have different types of ethics, right? We have military ethics, we have biomedical ethics. Are those standards that are universal? Like 2 + 2 = 4? It doesn't seem like it, right? There are different kinds of ethics. You could have legal ethics, right? You're not going to have legal morality. Morality is a certain thing, is a universal or generalized thing. Ethics can be specific to different areas.
Okay, I see what you're talking about. Okay, I gotcha. So if we change the hierarchy, morality to ethics, I just swap them into the argument.
Right, I think you'll do better. I think you have to include universal applicable to your definition of objectivity. Right? Because if I say something is objective, that doesn't make it objective, right? I mean, Roy is the most handsomest man on the earth, and I say that doesn't make it. So what makes it objective would be it has to be true everywhere and undeniably true. And
yeah, that is actually one of my original premises that I do have. I just didn't get it out there. But like I said, is we observe it in the real world. That's what we observe objectively. Like I said, 2 + 2 = 4. We observe that objectively across the board. Is that what you're saying?
Basically, but I don't like the word observe though, because observe sounds like a science, right? Like you have to observe it, and your observation can be mistaken. So if you want something to be certain, your premises have to be kind of certain, right? You have to start with certain premises, and then you can say, this is certain, this is certain. So my premises are certain and they're true. My conclusion should be true. You know
now you're breaking up at the end. The last sentence or two I didn't hear. Could you repeat that?
Yes. So basically what I'm saying is like I'm just basically giving you the layout of deductive reasoning, right? So I want my premises to be certain and true. And if premise 1 is true and certain, premise 2 is true and certain, my conclusion is going to be true and certain if I'm following the rules correctly. So using a scientific term is going to weaken it by allowing mistakes, right? My observation can be mistaken.
I understand.
All right. So like if you can stay away from science, if you can't, that's fine, but then you can't guarantee certainty with the conclusion.
Can you run through it again, just quickly again, Objective? I want to I don't know if Catholic Light or Eastern Thomas has anything to say up to this point. Maybe did either of you have anything to say, Catholic Light or Eastern Thomist?
I think I just want to make sure I even understand what your argument is. Is it basically that we can prove that some things are morally good or bad without a God, according to how they benefit us societally?
It's how society must interact. Basically, the correlation is between our society, which obviously functions in the biological world. So we could tie it to our responsibility to nature and our natural functions as an animal. So I could essentially tying morality to nature, so that there isn't a quote unquote objective standard from a God, because you run into a lot of definitional problems. First of all, I'm agnostic. I don't even believe in a God. I don't disbelieve in a God, but I could care less. How practically does that even matter? And some of these philosophical arguments, if I grant a God, how does that affect my life whatsoever? We have to get to something tangible from there, which is what I tend to have debates about. So people talk about morality, and skeptics like myself people make a lot of claims. Oh, you can't have any morals because you don't believe in God. And I think that's completely nonsensical. So to explain how we all believe, ultimately, we know we have proof that a society, if we look at a global scale, if murder just went completely unchecked, societies would collapse. You cannot have people just hacking away at each other without somebody stepping in at some point and saying, hey, this is dysfunctional. If we want to propagate as a species, which is ultimately what we are, is we are animals, given the natural worldview. Now, if you believe we're not animals, then obviously there are going to be issues, which I'm happy to hear those issues, because I'm really trying to formulate a solid argument, and the brother's helping me out a lot with understanding this. The interesting thing I will say, Roy, I've talked to Dr. Derek McAllister. I've talked to 2 other PhD philosophers. I've talked to an author of a book about this, and I've talked to so many people who are highly educated, and every single person gives me a completely different answer on, oh, well, this is what you should. No, you don't do that. This is what you should do. And then the next guy says, no, don't do that. This is what you should do. So it's really interesting how none of you guys, and I believe you're an educator as well. I don't know if you have a PhD or not, but I believe you're an educator in philosophy, if I remember right from the last conversation I heard. So you guys need to get together and figure this out. You're trying to help me out here.
Yeah, so the argument has to have, the terminology has to be important, right? So obviously you can have morals without a God, right? So the philosophy or field of deontology, illustrates that, right? So you don't need a God to have a morality. So you're talking about the divine command worshipers, right? The divine command people only. Right, that's another moral category, right? It's outside of deontology. I think that's what it's called, the moral divine command, the divine
command theory.
Yeah, divine command theory, right? It's different from deontology. It's different from relativism. It's its own category.
Right, and I reject divine command theory too. Just to be clear.
Do you have any other input, Eastern? I think I've spoken with you before. You seem familiar. I might have just listened in, but if you're the gentleman I'm thinking of, go ahead.
Yeah. So just to ask one more question to better understand, is the argument supposed to be that we can know by certain orders that have come about by evolution what morality is? Is that what the argument is? I'm just trying to figure it out. I don't want to straw man.
So essentially, tying it to evolution, the motivator to be moral is propagation of the species, and the observation throughout history is what we have to look back on and say, hey, things like slavery that was a really bad idea because it was highly immoral, and we can look at it pragmatically and say this is what it produced, and societies that are empathetic and that are caring about each other and that are going to support each other and they're going to be ethical cannot have slavery, for example. You cannot remove another person's autonomy like that. Obviously, you can have a justice system where you put people in prison, but that's not slavery. So we could look at throughout history and we could subjectively approach this. But when every single human being, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I interrupted you. Finish your thought. Sorry about that.
Oh, I would say if every single human being on the planet, or I would say every single, that's going to be impossible. But if we could say that the majority of people on the planet can observe something and say, yeah, that we agree on that. I mean, there's still people to this day that believe the earth is flat. And I can't believe those words are coming out of my mouth right now, but it's just, I have actually talked to somebody and I see it on the internet all the time. I thought people were just trolling, but I actually had a debate against a Catholic about the global flood nonsense, and his out to all the scientific evidence is that with the earth is flat and all these depths of the deep, he thought they were all the meteors that came out of the sky were actually, there are no meteors because of his worldview. I mean, the insanity that some people will believe, you're not going to get every single human being to agree on anything.
Right. Well, I mean, in regards to the idea that you have multiple generations that have observed certain goods and certain evils and certain atrocities in society. I mean, that is, and again, if I'm understanding your argument correctly, that is one of the things that St. Thomas talks about, and that is one of the things that's actually one of the proofs he has for the existence of God, is the idea that there is a maximum and a minimum of good in society. He says the fact that a person naturally has the capacity either to be averted or not averted by a specific circumstance is more evidence that there is a simple being that is supremely good, which we call God. For example, as you said before, somebody who's an atheist, somebody who's a hardened atheist, if they turn on the news, they could see that a person was stabbed to death. If they see 6-year-old killed today, they'll be absolutely appalled by that because ultimately they have a rational sense of knowing good and evil. But that's one of the proofs St. Thomas says for the existence of God, because that shows that there is a maximum and a minimum. And he would say if there's a maximum and a minimum, that means there ultimately has to be an intellect, which is ultimately the standard for that maximum. Again, I don't know if I'm answering your question really. I'm just trying to kind of get to the weeds of it and sort of understand what you're saying. I don't know if I am or if I am not answering it, but that's one of the things that I know you touched on that I know St. Thomas does address.
Can I put 2 cents in?
Yeah, go ahead, B.S. Lewis.
One thing I noticed, maybe I missed it, was the lack of using harm as any kind of standard for the. Did you throw that in or not?
Reduction of harm, maximum reduction of harm was in my original premise, but as I mentioned before, I talked to several PhD philosophers, and they said that should probably be removed. So I'm trying to make this argument more deductive by like what the gentleman was saying. So that's why I actually took harm out, because I was tying harm reduction to the well-being and well-being to virtue. So do you think I should put that back in there?
No, I think harm is intuitive. It really feels because it tugs at our emotions. But sometimes you do run into situations where it's wonky and it doesn't stick all the time. But since you didn't use harm, the one example I'd ask you about in your syllogism here is the instance of euthanasia. How does that factor in? Because you're talking about preservation of life, but there's a lot of people who think euthanasia is a good thing for those who are really suffering.
So and just give me the rundown on when you talk about euthanasia specifically. You're talking about ending people's lives based off of their circumstances.
Yeah, humanely, like putting down a dog. You do it because they're in so much misery that it's the humane thing to do, type of thing. Like,
Yeah, I
painless as
agree.
possible.
I agree with that. I do think that, for example, old people or anybody that's somebody's really depressed or whatever, if they don't want to continue on, I think the best thing to do is to give them their wish. You know what I mean? I mean, I know that sounds horrible, but I just think that, if that people are in such a destitute place, whether they're suffering physically or emotionally or mentally, if we can't give them the counseling or the medications or address that in a way that's going to cause them to feel good about things, then I think the most humane thing to do is to put them down if they're suffering, to end suffering.
Yeah, and
because I don't think that hurts us from an evolutionary standpoint, and that's really what I'm trying to ground this in.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to think as logically as possible, but that would be where the harm metric goes above the preservation of life metric, because obviously we're talking about killing somebody, right? So there's no preservation of life there, but we are substituting harm as our kind of higher standard there.
I don't want to take things over, but I see a lot of problems with your approach, objective. I'm not saying you're definitely wrong. I'm just seeing for something to be good. First of all, good is an abstraction. It's something that is conceived in a mind. And there must be a universal mind with to ground a universal concept of good. And also, for something to be good, there must be an ultimate end to where the universe is going. In atheism, and I know you don't claim to be an atheist, so I'm saying if atheism is true, there's no ultimate end to which anything is actually progressing. It's just a bunch of matter and energy moving through space. If the entire Earth self-destructed and blew up tomorrow, the universe wouldn't care. It doesn't care if there are humans or if there's life at all. So for something to be good, there must be an ultimate standard of what is a progress towards something that is an ultimate goal or end. Otherwise, with atheism, there is no ultimate purpose or end. It's just there is collections of atoms that have accumulated through time into the shape of biological organisms, and they're perceiving the universe around them for a short time, and then they die. And at some point, we will either continue or all die at some point, and all life will be extinguished. There's just no, in atheism, there can't be an ultimate good because there's no ultimate end to reality itself. So I think that for there to be an ultimate good, there needs to be a purpose beyond just the existence of the universe itself. There has to be some sort of objective to which we're working, which is God's purpose. Because the universe is indifferent to whether humans live or die or have good lives or not. And without there being a God who cares about humanity and whether humanity succeeds or not, I just don't see that being found in atheism or atheistic philosophy.
Well, let me just say this really quick, because this is a conversation I really wanted to have with you, because as I've said before, I think you're very intelligent, and all the guests on your panel here are extremely intelligent. You guys are really giving me a lot of great pushback, and I would love to actually have a deeper dive into this, but we started this conversation way late, and I know we're on a time limit here. So
You're right. How about this objective?
Just to touch on that,
go ahead.
Yeah, let's set up a time to get into this if it's good with you guys. I'd like to get back together with you guys and not to be disrespectful of A's this evening, but let me just address that. When you start talking about atheism, and what I think I'm hearing from you is you're talking about nihilism essentially, but that's really kind of a separate conversation, and I have a lot to say about that. I'm not a nihilist and I'm not an atheist, but I still do have a lot to say about that. So let's set something up for a future date or something, and let me just have my final word here now and thank B.S. Lewis, Roy, Catholic, Eastern, all you gentlemen, the gentleman who was on here before, I can't remember his name. There might have even been two people in here. I can't even remember now.
Champ and Lou.
Of course, Lou, Brooklyn Lou, I love that guy. And anyway, I just want to thank all of you gentlemen for your time, for a respectful conversation where people are reaching across the aisle to each other. I know I could probably speak for B.S. Lewis as a skeptic myself. It's extremely rare to be able to get into a room with theists, and I mean no disrespect when I say this, but you know how it is, things get so volatile, people get so upset, and it's hard to criticize, even if you're trying to be nice about it, something that people believe so deeply, and it does hold a lot of connected values to it, that inherent things such as your hope for the future, your chill, blah, 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 blah. So I really respect you guys for having a polite and civil discussion. And I'd like to get together again and hammer this out, because I didn't bring my syllogism with me, and I would have been better prepared for that.
How about this? I'll make this deal with you, Objective. The next time I have a discussion, if you join, we will stop whatever else we're talking about and focus specifically on your idea of how to ground ethics in, or morality or ethics, whatever you want to say, in naturalism. How about that?
Yeah, and you send me an email or post something on your channel so I can have some future planning onto that, because right now I'm really focusing. I've got a formal debate coming up on the 26th against a Christian nationalist about using the Bible as a grounding for society. So that has got to take priority. But I would love to do a post debate review with you, see what you think about the arguments. I think it's kind of interesting that this whole thing happened with Charlie Kirk, and he's kind of known, whether it's true or not, he's being labeled as a Christian nationalist. So it's kind of interesting how the timing on all that is going.
Yeah, that all sounds good. We'll be in communication, and I guess I'll take that was all your final statement, Objective, since we're closing.
Yes, thank you, gentlemen.
All right, we'll talk again. Oh wait, who just left? Oh, B.S. Lewis also left. Okay, well, he would have had a chance to speak, but I guess he chose not to. All right, Objective, I'm going to boot you. We'll talk later. All right. So how I usually do on my channel is everyone gets a final word. Just take a couple minutes. Don't spend the rest of the night just saying everything that you've ever wanted to say in your life. Just a minute or 2, 3 minutes, whatever. Anything you feel to address, you can whatever it is. Even if it's something that wasn't totally related to what we discussed, just go ahead. So we'll go in order of how people join. I think Eastern Thomist, and then Roychess, and then I guess as Catholic Light is kind of new, we'll go with him first, and then Eastern Thomist, and then Roychess. So Catholic Light, if you have anything you want to say, feel free.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I don't know. I think there's just too many cooks in the kitchen. Like there's a lot of cool places. I think some of those conversations could have gone, but it's just there's too many different people, and it just pulls in different directions. But I do think there was more to what the Objective guy was saying, and I also think there was more to what the B.S. Lewis guy was saying before that we didn't get into. Because the way I like to interact with people, I like ask a lot of conversations and try and ask a lot of questions. I mean, and try and I don't know. And it's just hard to do that in a group setting.
You're right.
But
you're right. That is absolutely a problem with these formats, is that everyone wants to talk and only one person can talk at a time, and it's hard to focus. But at the same time, I have to ensure that I think I trade that for everyone getting a chance to talk, which leads to more chaos. But I think people feel better about participating so I sacrifice focus for every participation, I guess, is how I do it on this channel.
Yeah. No, I don't think I'm not criticizing or anything. It's just the nature of these conversations. There's no way to do
You're
that.
right, though. You're right. It'd be nice if we could find some resolution and focus on one thing. I wish that was I wish that could happen, but also with time limits, sometimes it's hard, but yeah.
I guess what that makes me want to say is, I don't know if any of y'all do your own streams on your own little channels. I would let me know, put it in the chat, and I can join and call onto your own shows, and we can go different places. I'm just very new on looking at YouTube, and I set this account up yesterday.
Well, you can sub to my channel and then come back whenever you want. Or
I did. Okay. I just saw it today, and I did because I saw you were live. But no, yeah, there's just a lot of cool places to go, and yeah. So I'd like to just call onto other channels. That's really my main impression. We didn't get too much into anything for me to have a substantive response to any particular argument, I suppose.
Yeah,
I gotcha. All right. Well, thank you for. Well, before you go, Eastern Thomas, let me just say thank you for being here, Catholic, and you are certainly welcome back.
Yeah, I think this is the only time I've been on with another Catholic.
Yeah,
this is the only time I've ever been on.
Yeah, but I've been on here before with other Christians. I've been on with people who are not Trinitarian. I've been on with Unitarians. I've been on with atheists. I don't think I've ever been on with a second Catholic before.
Yeah, and I haven't been on many, like, I've called onto these shows before, but generally speaking, they're run by Muslims, and they're a lot less organized than what I saw today.
Yeah.
So
cool.
you know,
Hopefully,
that's
yeah.
a cool thing.
All
Anyway,
right, Catholic, I'm gonna boot you, and we'll talk again sometime, hopefully. All right, yeah, let's go with Tom. Who wants to go first? Y'all decide. I don't care who it is.
Roy can
All right,
go.
Roychess, you go first. A minute or two to give any final thoughts you have about whatever was discussed.
Yes, thank you very much. Again, thank you for having me. The topics of morality always pique my interest. I try to do what I can to at least get the narrative that morality is subjective out of people's heads. I think I sent you a text. Remember that text I sent you? You posted something and I responded.
I do. Yeah, I do.
Yeah. So, like, it kind of irks me when people say morality is subjective. Personally, because it's definitely not. It's definitely, at least in philosophy, it's not. And in deontology, it's pretty well defined that it's not subjective. That you're supposed to have something universal, something applicable to everywhere you go in the domain, and such and such. We didn't get into much tonight, but I was trying to. And as far as the Bible goes, again, I've focused on deductive arguments that are going to lead to certainty instead of just subjective arguments that are going to just go back and forth. I always lead to deductive arguments if I can, and a lot of people don't do that. So it's hard for me to do that when they're doing the inductive thing. So I'm still working on it. So that's why I try to engage where I can, so I can still navigate myself and how to navigate around those arguments to bring it back to something meaningful.
Awesome. Thank you, Roychess. Thank you for your contributions. Until next time.
Yes, thank you.
All right, Thomas.
All
Your time
right.
to shine.
All right. Well, yeah, we had this was definitely an interesting conversation. There were a lot more people here than a lot more people here with a lot of diverse backgrounds, and I'm glad it was a civil argument. Again, I think the problem of evil, I've never really viewed it as that big of a problem or that much of or as big of a moral dilemma as it's made out to be. Again, because when you understand the kind of Aristotelian view or Neoplatonic view on participation as it's incorporated into Christian and Catholic theology, which is basically the idea that man's dignity is that God has created that person with the rational faculties to freely use those rational faculties to react to God and accept the supreme good and participate in the supreme good by faith. But again, if you're going to create that principle, that would also, by de facto, mean that a person can use those rational faculties, misuse those rational faculties in bad ways. Like, for example, instead of using that rational faculty to seek God, a person could seek lust or money or any other sort of material good. So in that regards, I think it makes perfect sense. And in regards to why God doesn't just supersede that, God could, but he freely chooses not to because he is inclined towards the dignity of his own creation. But, also he, some of them were talking about, well, why does cancer exist? Why does disease exist? Again, that's very simple. St. Thomas describes justice as the harmony with the supreme good, which is God. And therefore, a privation of that would be an injustice. And, when you have a privation of justice, you're going to have suffering that doesn't seem positive. But again, when you understand that principle of God creating his creatures and his creation with the dignity to ultimately choose the supreme good and react to unmerited grace in that manner freely, I think it makes a lot of sense when you really, get down to the weeds of that.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. All right, Eastern Thomas, thanks again for joining.
Of course, thank you.
All right, I'm going to close things down pretty quick here. I'm not going to get too in-depth into any particular argument. I think that there were a lot of interesting points made. I really, in the beginning, I was talking about the Charlie Kirk incident, something that troubles me very deeply in and of itself. I'm sure I'm not alone on that, but also how people are reacting, how this country was basically founded on the idea of people being able to hold various views and express them and know they're in a place that they can safely do that, even if they will, there are consequences for saying things that are controversial, this, that, and the other. People responding, if somebody's response is to say that, first of all, Charlie Kirk, the things he was saying were deserving, he deserved what he got. I think that comes from a very dark place and a dangerous place. And obviously, you're free to disagree with him and say if you think he's a bad person for what he believes. I disagree with that. I think he was a great person, an inspirational person. But when you start saying you start justifying an assassination of somebody in public, or even if it hadn't been the way it was, you're entering dangerous territory. You really are. And I think the fact that so many people are responding this way is a sign of trouble in our society. And my opinion is that the people who feel this way shouldn't be represented in government. Now, that doesn't mean I don't think they should have their right to vote should be taken away. I just think that the people they vote for, who I mentioned earlier, which is almost universally, it seems like to me, the Democrat Party. I think if the Democrat Party is going to represent these people, then that's dangerous. The limitations on free speech, the idea that people who disagree with you are worthy of being silenced lethally in that way, that's not something that's healthy for our society. So we need to think about that. As far as we talked a lot about the problem of suffering, the problem of evil. I have videos on my channel addressing this. I address why are there good reasons to think God would create a universe with suffering. B.S. Lewis had some interesting arguments about his premises, and that it's worth thinking about. I just feel like, and maybe I know obviously he's going to disagree, but I feel like free will does solve a lot of the problems of why evil exists in the world, and even why just general suffering exists in the world. A lot of diseases are brought about by our own actions. It's conceivable that every single disease we can think of would be cured if we put a sufficient amount of energy and effort into finding the cure. Because obviously, we've cured various diseases in history, and they no longer really plague a lot of people the way they used to. Now, if God exists, God knew what the cure was all along, but just didn't tell us until we figured it out. So I think God is operating this way. This is our domain. God's going to let us, God can reveal anything at any time, presumably, but this is what the sciences are for, is discovering these things. I think that theoretically, at a theoretical level, maybe one day we will eliminate all diseases, and then where would the atheists go with this argument? They'll probably just say, like, oh, we did it. God had nothing to do with it. But the point is, the universe was built in such a way that this was attainable by God. So there must be something we're doing that's resulting in this, even if we don't understand it. And they haven't proven that there's no objective benefit or ultimate benefit to the suffering we experience, even if we don't understand it. Even if it feels horrible, then maybe there is a reason beyond what we understand for why these things occur, why they must necessarily logically be the way they are. Natural disasters, I think that's pretty easy too. There's the laws of physics. The laws of physics are a manifestation of the nature of God, the essence of God. That's why they're eternal. And when we combine that with human free will, basically we're just going to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The laws of physics are going to collide with where we are as a result of our free will. And at that point, God has a decision to make: suspend the laws of physics or literally intervene in space and time and remove that threat from people. But if God did that all the time, then it would defeat the purpose of creating a universe with laws of physics and natural laws and things like that. So, yeah, unfortunately, these things are going to happen, and it might happen to me. I don't want it to happen, but that's just the way the laws of logic, laws of nature, and science work. Yeah, and as far as free will, yeah, for God to create us for free will, that does mean that we have to have the ability and option to do horrible things to one another. I haven't had an atheist or a skeptic explain to me how God could create a universe where humans have free will and also they don't do bad things to each other, or there's no possibility of that happening. And like I was saying earlier about design constraints, God has determined that he wants a universe with creatures with free will. And again, we have to establish that free will exists, but under this presupposition, free will, God has determined, is superior to the creatures not having free will. Okay, well, the design constraint is if they have free will, then they have the free will to do things that perhaps are things that God doesn't think are harmonious with God's will and how he wants us to treat each other and what is objectively good. But that's the design constraint. Just like if you're, in a very simple example, designing a car, you can't design a car that is like a lowrider and also a car that rides very high off the ground if you have some more functional use. It's like they're just logical trade-offs. Sometimes when you're designing an engine, you're going to have to design it a certain way where you can maybe get, like, if it's really heavy, it'll slow the car down. So let's think about it this way: if you design an engine that's super duper heavy, it'll slow the car down, but it's really powerful, so maybe it can pull something. But if you design a light engine and a light chassis, maybe the car can go really fast, but it can't pull something. So there are design constraints. I think the same thing with the universe. There's design constraints. God has to operate within the laws of logic, which are in essence a manifestation of God's essence, energy, and things like that. So, yeah, this is the problem. The problem of suffering is an argument from ignorance. We can't know all the variables of what it takes to create a universe. God does, presumably, hypothetically, assuming God does exist. So to me, the problem of suffering is, well, okay, yeah, it's a question mark, but I have come to the idea of God before I got there. There needs to be some grounding for existence, some principle that is the reason for why things exist in the first place. There has to be, in my mind, teleological basis for why the universe, the laws are set, established, immutable, and things like that. Why complex beings like humans exist in the first place. I don't think the laws of nature moving around, blowing atoms around in space can explain how they arrange themselves in living beings. I don't think evolution is true, because evolution is just atoms moving around in space, and people want to say over billions of years they managed to form themselves into these. No, it's just not possible. Like the blind laws of nature don't care if they create a human or if they create a puddle of mud. So why would we believe that atoms moving around in space could eventually produce something as precisely arranged and complex as a human being, or even just a single-celled organism is incredibly complex. They can't make one scientists can't even make one still. They can't even make a single cell. This is how complex things are. They can manipulate currently existing cells and kind of manipulate them and modify them. But if you just took chemicals into a lab and tried to build a cell from it, they can't do it yet. A single-celled organism, even the simplest possible thing you can imagine. So this is with our intelligence and our knowledge of science and all these things. So to think that the blind laws of
of energy and matter and physics, blowing particles around in space. We're somehow able to achieve this on a hostile Earth, pre-biotic earthly environment. It's atheist mythology is what it is. But they believe that's their faith. They don't want to admit that. Anyways, okay, I'm going to end the stream. I know that a lot was left on the table. I know that any skeptics listening would very much like to respond to the things I've said, and maybe we'll have a future conversation and they can do that. But right now I'm just going to end the stream, and I just want to say thank you to everyone who participated, everyone who watched. Please like and subscribe. And until next time, God bless.